Michelle Kirkby here.
Jessica Riley here.
Tim Knight here.
Mayo Shaper here, and Leo Brown is traveling with us right now. So at this time, citizens may address the committee on items of school business not on the agenda. The committee will take such items under advisement without action at the meeting during which the item is presented. Matters pertaining to the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health of individuals will not be permitted. Members of the public will also be welcome to comment during the public input through Zoom. Please raise your Zoom hand and we'll pop you over, and we'll ask that you please keep your camera on the Zoom comment and follow the school committee policy for public comment, including speaking for no more than 3 minutes. And with that, do we have any public comment? Public input? Okay. Wonderful.
Nothing on Zoom?
Anything on who's monitoring this? No?
No hands raised.
Okay, lovely, thanks. So at this time, we'll have the approval of minutes, the executive session of September 15th, 2022, regular session, September 12th, September 15th, and October 13th, 2022, and our workshop on September 30th, 2022. And I would request that we hold, do not release the executive session of September 15th, 2022.
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
A second, Tim.
Second, Tim. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. Now, the releasing of the executive session minutes. There's quite a few. And so, August 11th, 2021, August 6th, 2021, September 9th, 2021, October 7th, 2021, November 1st, 2021, and November 18th, 2021, January 13th, 2022, January 27th, 2022, February 10th, 2022, February 24th, 2022, March 10th, 2022, March 18th, and March 24th, 2022, April 14th, 2022, May 2nd, May 19th, 2022, June 14th, 16th, 24th, 2022, August 2nd, and August 22nd, 2022.
Madam Chair, just ask you to amend those, the 8/11/2021 are not in your materials.
8/11.
This is the first one.
Oh, okay.
Was it? Okay.
Okay. All right.
Madam Chair, may I just quickly speak
Please.
to the reason that we release executive session minutes?
Please.
So when we do, and this is for public, when we do executive sessions, they are held for a specific reason under a certain number of exemptions to the open meeting law. We then review them about once every 6 months to a year to see which ones may be released at this point without affecting negatively committee decisions, personnel, and things like that. You may find some of them have some mild redactions in them, and there are some that will not be released at all because they're continuing to be relevant to their exception. So just before we vote on those, I want to make sure that everybody knows exactly why it is that we would vote to release these this late in the game.
That was helpful. Thank you.
So I'd be willing to move to release those.
Okay.
Mhm.
And do we have a second?
I second, Tim Knight.
Second. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. It passes. Thank you. This will be released. New business. Dr. Marsden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have the principals of secondary schools here. We have Matt Vaughn and Robert Varga. So they're going to do their opening presentation. They also have members of their schools like council that will go right after they're finished with their opening. So I'd like to welcome them up.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Jeff said I could have about 45 minutes, so I think that I'm kidding.
Was
So
that
I wanna-
with or without the slides?
Well, we'll see.
It has to be about slides, by the way.
Yeah, fair enough.
Not my meeting.
Strict directions. So I want to thank the school committee, central offices, our custodians, our full staff, our admin assistants. It's been a great, and our students especially, it's been a great opening start to the year. I think as the elementary principal shared, it definitely had a much, I hesitate to use the word normal, but more typical start to the year than it's been in a few years, and it's just been wonderful on many levels. I want to thank, once again, Tricia and Arlene, who are our nurses. They are just still caring for us every day, and we're in a much better spot with the pandemic and with our safety protocols, but they are have just been doing such amazing work, and so I want to make sure to give a special shout out also to our head custodian, Matt Frazier, and the team always working with Amy and Michael to make sure our buildings are in good shape to start. So it's been wonderful. Also want to just give a special thank you for the care that everyone has expressed in our community for Kelly Campbell, who went through the surgery very successfully last year and then had to have, unfortunately, another surgery and really repeat the process again in August. And just the entire school community and from staff and central office has been amazing. And Marsha Berkowitz is still staying with us, which has been wonderful. So she's been doing a great job as our interim. So that's been great. Kelly is doing really well and anticipates coming back slowly starting in January, which is great. So thank you. Our enrollment numbers this year, we have 15 more students in the building than we did last year. We have 585 students, 199 in sixth grade with 6 new students coming to Blake. Seventh grade, 203 students with also 6 new students. In eighth grade, 5 new students enrolling with 183 students. Including all reconfigurations and reassignments, we also have 16 new Blake staff members this year. Some facility updates, which want to update, which has been wonderful. The roof is being still in process. That's been we've had a rough couple of years with some leaks and it's lined up, and definitely some of the process was delayed as a result of the pandemic and supplies coming. So it's coming along really nicely, and the team has been great. Again, thanks to Michael and Amy and the team for being flexible. It's really hard to do that kind of work during the school day. And they've been very, very flexible, understanding when there's any smells going on, about pausing their work and making up on the weekend, which is great. A new boiler system at Blake. So a lot of things that we don't always see, which is definitely impacting the building. And also our entire library space in the makerspace has been reinvigorated with new carpeting, and the makerspace floor is phenomenal. It's a nice, clean floor without carpeting, so our custodians are also very happy. It's a really messy space, and it looks fantastic. Which has just been, and that's been very heavily used during the school day and after school as well. I would say from supports for students, our priority is always safety and well-being. As I shared at Parent Information Night, we talk a lot about, I would say we are definitely in a mental health pandemic for our adolescents, and that's very real. And I'll talk about some of the supports that we put in place as well. So always, which has been continuing always, but even more so, care, flexibility, and grace is important, and truly our social emotional learning is the driver for everything. And really thinking about, which I think you'll hear later when we talk about with the site council, looking at a strengths-based approach versus a deficits-based approach towards learning and supporting our students. And just thinking about supports too, I'm so thrilled that today was the first day for the late bus at the middle school and high school. So on behalf of our students and everyone, it was just wonderful news, and our staff just so thankful. So it's just a great opportunity, which is great. And Jeff shared there were a number of students using it today. So and I think that will build. I really do. Speaking of supports for students, very thankful that last year we started and really ad hoc put together a program to support students during the school day, similar to the RISE program at the high school, for kids that need more supports, or maybe transitioning back from a hospitalization, or maybe having some school refusal, or challenges getting to class. So through work, and Dr. Marston and Mary Brule have been incredibly supportive as well about making sure that we have the funding to support that from a staffing perspective. So right now we have a teaching assistant working very closely with Stacy Burns, who's our adjustment counselor, and Marsha Berkowitz, really helped facilitating that work, and then coordinating with also Dr. Worthley. And our program is called Bridges, which is an acronym, stands for Blake Respects individuals' development and growth through educational emotional supports. And just a few bullet points off of it. It's a short-term program for students who have acute emotional challenges for a wide range of concerns, what they might be. Priority is to maintain individualized high academic standards for each student and ongoing partnership with families and outside providers. I would say I have mixed feelings about saying that it's being heavily used right now. That idea that the system is there to support kids in a lot of ways, and I can't just thank you all enough for supporting that, because we know the need is real. And I wish I was going to, I don't want to be too negative, but I don't think that need is going away. It's really been a very comfort for our students and our families as well, and also coordinating with Kathy at Medfield Outreach to coordinate services as well, which has been fantastic. In a similar vein, we've been using some of the new work to also relook at our student support team processes and procedures. So we've updated our forms, incorporating learning skills into the process based off some of the work, and really working with our MTSS committee and looking at our curriculum accommodation plan. Our goals for the year are similar. What they look like is using research-based practices for a culture of learning. 3 overarching goals: to amplify student learning, curate teaching practices to foster professional growth. We want to make sure we're a learning staff, and also enhancing student reflection, looking at our formal and informal systems of feedback. Our theme this year is discovery, and really using that as a theme to really enhance the understanding of adolescence, and that this is a time period, and really built off the theme from last year's of curiosity and imagination as the roots of learning. And that all of this, how can we foster their learning? Really think about our classes, that we want to give options to every kid and not pigeonhole them into different tracks of learning at this point, how important that is at the middle school. And using our advisory periods for speakers and assemblies. And last week, Travis Tolliver reached out to Marion Bonaldi, the town clerk, to come in and use that time period to teach the kids about the election process, which was great. Very pertinent questions from the 8th graders. And again, it's a wonderful connection for them now that civics is a core aspect of the 8th grade curricula, which is great. Thinking just in this, just a few other things, our mission, always making sure that we're adaptable to meet students where they are and bring them forward. Really calibrating our practices. We did some more R&D work with advisory and how we're going to use that time period to support students. So we have a structure now, and using Thursday. So 2 days a week is recess. 1 day is sort of organizational. And then 1 day of the week is sort of up to the clusters to use to meet with kids. And then 1 week, we call it our What I Need period. So it's kind of built in extra help during the day. Some kids can work on homework. In a lot of ways similar here. I know Robert will talk about flex period. It's a great piece because it's there for whatever we might need, and that we can adapt for them. Culture of feedback, we've continued the practice that we started during the pandemic of interim times checking in with kids through some Google Forms and surveys. We just did the midterm of term 1 and asking kids just different questions so that we can gain insight, which has been great. The Panorama survey was just administered last Friday, so we're looking forward to those results. And then also we have the results from the Metro-West Adolescent Health Survey that we'll be talking about how to share that as well. And the data does mirror what we know. In general, we have aspects that we're doing really well and aspects that our kids are really struggling. In particular, some of our more marginalized communities. And then also coming up, we have the Samaritans program for our 7th grade, the Signs of Suicide presentation for our 7th grade. And we're also doing with 6th grade for the first time this year as well, which I think is really important. And we're taking faculty meeting time for them to do a presentation with our staff because we haven't done that in a while. I think it's just so important. We can't do that enough. I'm going to pause on the culturally responsive practices. We'll talk about that. And then just an update about feedback and reporting. A lot of work has been with the new systems that we've established. The transition to the new report card went really well last year with our adapted system. And we're really looking at calibrating our learning skills. A lot of the work was around the content and priority standards and making sure that how math is reporting a learning skill is similar to social studies and English, taking time to do that, and I think understandably so, the focus was much more on the content and how important it is also to calibrate with learning skills too. And a lot of this thinking about portfolios potentially, and also building towards conferences. So that work we'll be working on. I'm thrilled and what that'll look like. And we just have to figure out what that will look like at the middle school level. And I know that'll happen at the high school as well. And then finally, just from a student involvement, culture, and growth, just a few things, how important it is that we are able to, again, do things we haven't been able to do in a long time. Have in-person presentations, have more assemblies, and more experiences, field trips, which is great. We started to do a little bit at the end of last year. We are taking the 8th grade to Washington, D.C. which is fantastic. Definitely a big endeavor, so thank you for supporting that. And so that planning is going on. Also, this Wednesday is one of my favorite days of the year, right around Veterans Day. We bring local veterans to come and they talk to our sixth graders, and then we have a luncheon with them, and it's just awesome. So looking forward to that. Middle school theater production of High School Musicals coming up. I'm sure you'll hear shout outs from Tracy Allen about that coming, so please come. Intramurals and student council are active, and we made the change last year to make student council open to all versus elections. And it really is, I mean, definitely some ebbs and flows because some advisories may not have a student council rep. So we have to kind of work that out, but it's much more inclusive. We have a lot of kids coming, which is great. And then other systems of support for our Blake GSA, which is now called our Pride Alliance versus the GSA, felt it was more inclusive. And then Blake Battles Bias is meeting every other week. And then just coming up soon is the Hour of Code in December. So we'll look forward to that. I'll probably be reaching out to all of you to come help out. So I know I speak quickly. There's a lot of information. I don't know if there's any questions you have or.
I have a comment and a question.
Okay.
And I don't always mean to flip to the mental health aspect. But I do remember, and Anime, you were here too when we started, when Dr. Marston and Dr. Berthley started RISE. And we were very surprised by how many kids were served that first year. And it hasn't gone away and it hasn't dipped. And I think it just speaks to a need. And I'm very glad to hear that there is a Bridges program at the middle school. You know, mental health doesn't all of a sudden pop up as an issue somewhere around 14. You know, that this is a continuum.
Absolutely. From
early childhood on, quite up, frankly. So, and particularly in this time, I'm very glad to hear it. I also hear, though, that you have a four-legged staff member
Yeah,
coming
we
in
do.
occasionally.
Yep. So one of our dog, Katie, my wife, our dog is a therapy dog through, I forget what the organization is, I should know, Pets and People Foundation, I think. And Katie's been coming out once a week. I would love to have her come more. It's been awesome. Comes into the library, hangs out, and they're, you know, some kids are regulars, other kids just pop in during the time period. It's just been fantastic. So,
What a wonderful way that, you know, I know that we kind of briefly talked about it, but how we could possibly make that happen for all of our schools, because it does bring such a different element.
It is amazing to see.
To kids and ways of communicating, when social skills, when just needing to communicate with people seems very people-y.
I mean, it's been just amazing to see some of the kids, they start talking to their peers when the dog's there.
Right.
That they wouldn't necessarily, and just, so for some of our students, it's been a draw for them to come to school on Wednesday. So it's great.
You know, academic learning isn't the only thing that's multimodal.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Question, and that is, when you talked about twice a week, they've got recess and then organizational stuff.
Yep.
What does that mean, the organizational stuff?
So advisory, our structure, advisory meets every day.
Yeah.
So on Monday, it's really kind of the grounding for the week. And what that looks like, it looks a little bit different than 6th and 7th and 8th grade. This is broad stroke generalization. Our 6th graders need, well, it varies what it looks like, need more organizational help typically with that. So a lot of it is, what do we have coming up for the week? Let's organize, whether you have a physical binder or electronic binder, some time to kind of map out what the week may coming up. Tuesday and Friday is recess. And also it's kind of figuring out, well, you know what, maybe you do need to go see that teacher during this time period or to check in. Guidance counselors also know that that's a built-in time that they can without removing from class and what that looks like. Some students do get some services during that time, depending on what it looks like. And then Wednesday is known as a time that we try not to schedule other things. Also, like I would say, like the check-ins, the Google Form survey that we do for kids, we try to make sure, let's do that on Wednesday. If we're gonna do an assembly, let's do it on Wednesday, because when possible, we don't want to take away recess time, because that kind of schedules all around. And then Thursday's the what I need block. And then Friday we end with recess. And the weather just as of late has just been amazing. So, I mean, today, also knowing Friday, we won't have it this Friday. We connect with the specialist coordinator. We took the kids outside. The 8th grade didn't get it last week because of the assembly. Let's get them outside as long as we can. So the more we can do that, which is great. Does that help?
Yes,
Okay.
for sure. And really just to echo what Jess said about bridges, you know, the name itself is very symbolic. So I really appreciate and so grateful that exists. I'm sorry we need that, but we do.
Yeah,
And a work of linguistic gymnastics, if I've ever heard. very appreciative of that.
Well, no worries. Yeah, and what the piece too is, it was last year in some ways, we hesitated putting a name on it because we weren't sure about program, what that would look like. So it kept being referred to as the program, which didn't have the best connotation. But with that said, it really did give us a lot. I'm glad we were able to pilot and try things out because it helped work what worked well with communication with teachers, what worked well with families, what do they need, what do they not need. And some families want more information than others about the academic learning. So it allows us to put some systems in place to also track the data, which is really important. Are we doing some trends to work with our counselors as well? So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Good evening. Robert Parga, the principal here at the high school, and a proud supporter of therapy dogs in school. So Nat and I will be talking after this one. Good evening. First of all, thank you for having us. It's great to see you. It's my pleasure to report on the opening of school for Medfield High School. Before I talk about the opening, I want to take this opportunity to thank our secretarial staff, our custodians, for all their help in getting the building ready for students and staff. As you can imagine, there's a lot of work that they do over the summer behind the scenes to make the building ready for the opening. So we greatly appreciate their many efforts. They take a lot of pride in the building, and it shows. I know many of you have been through the building the first days, and the building is fantastic. I also want to thank our central office administration as well as you, the school committee, for your continued support for the work that we do. It was a wonderful opening to the building, as Nat alluded to, being able to open school without the restrictions that we've been dealing with for the last couple of years. Somewhat of a return to normalcy, if I can say, in the way we operate, in the way we teach, and the way our students learn. It's been exciting. The many restrictions that made it challenging for us to engage students, for the most part, have been lifted, and we've seen a noticeable difference in their approach to learning and their approach to how they interact with us and their peers. It's just been exciting to kind of get back to the business that we've been accustomed to. So this fall, we've also seen a return to our many events and activities, which is a big part of our school culture here at the high school. Our annual cruise that we take with our students in the Boston Harbor took place the first week of school. And it's always a great way to welcome our seniors back from school vacation. Our student athletes saw a return to fall sports as well without any restrictions, and it's been a very successful season for the Warriors. Just a quick recap of how we're doing. There's a lot happening this week. Our field hockey team, girls soccer team, boys soccer team, and girls volleyball team all qualified for the state playoffs. And a number of our boys and girls cross-country runners are going to be running at the divisional meet this coming up weekend. Girls volleyball won tonight in their playoff game, so they are advancing to the quarterfinals later this week. With the playoff win last week, our field hockey team has moved on to the quarterfinals this week. And congratulations to Michael and our girls soccer team. They have also moved on as well. So it's definitely an exciting time of year for our student athletes. In late September, we welcomed back our parents for our first in-person open house since the fall of 2019, which means that prior to this year, the only parents that we currently have are parents of seniors that have actually experienced an in-person open house. It's a very important event for all of us. As a parent of a child who was in high school during the pandemic, I know it was challenging on many levels. We all felt a sense of disconnect as a result of not really being able to get into the buildings and meet teachers. The in-person open house we had here in September provided a fantastic way for our teachers and parents to share and re-engage in the process of learning. Without a doubt, one of the highlights that we have each year here at Medfield High School is our fall play. This year, the Medfield High School Theater Society is performing the play Radium Girls. We have nearly 100 students, cast and crew, who've been working hard in advance of the shows that will take place the weekend of the 18th. We hope you can join us for one of the two shows. If you're interested, tickets can be purchased online at medfielddrama.weebly.com. So we'd love to see you at our performances to support our students. In terms of new initiatives and approaches we are exploring here at the high school, I want to highlight a student support program that we piloted towards the end of last year and have now formalized. As you know, one of the important aspects of our new schedule that we got off the ground last year is the flex period. And just to remind you, flex period is a time of day that allows students to get extra help from teachers, meet with guidance counselors, and other support staff. Students can work independently. They can work collaboratively in various spaces within the building. We have grade level meetings and other information sharing sessions that take place during Flex as well. Flex takes place 5 out of every 8 school days, just like every other class that we have. Now, when we first launched our new schedule last fall, we talked about the benefits of Flex and the opportunities that would emerge in terms of having this time now with students and teachers available. So one such program that we've now got off the ground is a link peer tutoring program. What we've done is we've created an opportunity for students to access peer tutoring during Flex period. Upperclassmen who have expressed interest in tutoring will meet with our link trainers, who will train them in how to become effective peer tutors. Once the peer tutors have gone through training, they are matched with classroom teachers. This year, link tutoring is provided in the subjects of biology, physics, chemistry, geometry, algebra 2, calculus and pre-calculus, French, Spanish, and the Writing Center. We currently have 19 upperclassmen who are functioning as peer tutors right now. The peer tutoring takes place in the classroom under the supervision of the subject teacher, and the response from our students has been overwhelmingly positive. I want to give a big shout out to our link coordinators, Laura Keene, Elise DeLuzio, and Amanda Patton. They saw a need and an opportunity with Flex. This is something we've talked about for about a year, and we're really excited that this program has gotten off the ground. As we continue to look for ways to capitalize on Flex time, there will be more programs and initiatives I know that will emerge here in the coming years. Our students continue to report that having the ability to work with teachers during the school day in this support setting has benefited them greatly. In our most recent Metro West Health Survey data, I'm pleased to report that students reported that their stress levels are lower than where they have been in previous reports. And in talking to students, the new schedule with the support systems that we have in place at Flex is definitely a contributing factor. So we're very pleased with where we are right now, about a little over a year into our new schedule. And like I said, we're continuing to grow it, and when we see a need, we try to fill that void. And our staff has been fantastic, being creative and coming up with different ideas for supports for students. So that is what I have for our opening report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Fantastic. I hadn't heard about link tutoring, so I think that's brilliant. So do the upper class students, do they apply or are they chosen?
Well, yeah, we've reached out. Teachers have reached out as well to help us select students. And so if you're a peer tutor, you're not giving up all 5 of your flexes, you're giving up 1.
Yeah.
But with the 19 that we have, we're able to offer it on a regular basis. And we've provided some consistency, so the peer tutor will report to the same teacher to work with the same subject and students as well.
Now, how do the underclassmen or people who need it find out about it?
Yeah, through guidance and through teachers. And
Okay.
our teachers might recommend this service to a student or to a family, and the guidance counselors will do that as well. We've always kept a list of peer tutors in the building, and prior to our new schedule, that for the most part took place after school, and there's always logistical issues with just trying to line everyone up with all the activities that we have. So with Flex being in the middle of the day, we just saw a wonderful opportunity to make it happen during the school day. And we have found that our students who are seeking tutoring have been more responsive to reaching out during that time. So it's worked out well. Yeah.
As a parent who has now my 4th kid, the Flex new schedule is revolutionized.
I would agree. Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah.
revolutionized, I think, the student experience. So I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And I also have to say, I have a junior now, obviously, but I also have a freshman this year. And I have not been hearing the same level of concern or stress, or at least for the amount of time of that kind of initial break to Medfield High. And so I can only say that as a personal experience, but I do think that I have seen that transition look a lot different this year. And it may be the Flex, and it may be just kind of how people are now kind of being that much more kind of flexible and understanding that the secondary schools are a continuum. But I do want to say that I saw a real difference around that this year.
You've heard from student reps when they come through.
Yeah.
They always mention it, so
Yeah.
it's a great change, great update.
Well, one of the challenges we had a year ago was we were all learning a new schedule. Because
Right.
it was, it was new to all 4 grades and all teachers, and now it's we're, like I said, a year plus into it. It was just really transitioning the freshmen into a new schedule, so it's been a lot easier for them as well. And like anything, some students come in ready to go and ready to capitalize on that independent time that they have, and others need more support, which is completely developmentally appropriate. And our goal is to just take them where they are and just continue to provide them with the supports that they need to make some independent decisions with their time. And for the most part, we've seen pretty good results.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I like to hear. It's almost like oxygen's been released in the building when stress levels, appear to be going down. I think of last year when both of you spoke and you talked a little bit about behavioral issues and some of the impact of the pandemic, and it seems like that's I don't know if it's stabilizing or
Definitely better. I could speak for the high school. Definitely better from where we were a year ago. Understandably so. I mean, it was a rough couple of years for all of us, students, parents, teachers, and I think that now that I know.
Yeah, no, I know.
Now that things have settled a little bit more, you just walk through the building and you just see students really just not worried about a lot of the things that I felt like they were worried last year, and the masks and the 6 feet, and just although the 6 feet was even the year before, but just some of the restrictions that we had to deal with, and having to miss school for however long they had to miss school. I just think it's relieved a lot for so many, and it's been.
And I almost think it'll be interesting. It's interesting to hear, Matt, you're saying that the student well-being and that's stress is on the up. It's I don't want to it's not paraphrasing correctly, but I'm trying to, I would like to see, wouldn't that be great if we're both there? It's it's positive to hear, because I think of, especially in high school, as your seniors, especially, that's a really high time to go stress this time of year. Yeah. So
the November 1 deadline was.
so it's good news.
I also want to just give you a quick note of praise, particularly to Brenda and Heather, who I think really scheduling wise pulled off that back to school night, parent night, just exceptionally well. There was never a point where I was like, where am I supposed to be and in which kid and what classroom? And it was really just very smooth. It was really quite nice.
Oh, thank you.
It was just great to be in school too.
You bring that up, and just one point about that. Again, we used to do our open house with the classroom teachers and the parents, and this year we actually added flex to the beginning, because as I mentioned earlier, our students meet with their flex teacher just as much as they meet with every other teacher that they have. So we thought it was important, a good message to send to families as well, like this period is important to us. So we scheduled flex in, as you know, into the open house so that the families could meet their child's flex teacher, because we felt that was just important. So thank you for noting that, though.
Absolutely.
Now, did you say the current senior class, that was their first open house in person?
No, the current senior parents were the only ones that had experienced it, because we hadn't for the others.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I know. And even for some of our new staff, we've hired staff in the last few years, and we hadn't had one. So the things we took for granted.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have Brenda Justsafer, and where happened to her? Oh, there he is. Over there. Site council member from middle school as well. I apologize for but they're going to come and talk a little bit about the work that they've been doing along with Nat regarding cultures on the school. So.
Great.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Hi, everyone. Brenda Hagan, one of the assistant principals at the high school. Nice to see you again. So we are here as a combination of parents and teachers, just represented teachers, and of course, Nat is here. We want to talk about our work with culturally responsive practices that we've been doing over the last couple of months, and kind of going back to last year from different perspectives. So We think it's important to define the term to allow for a better understanding of our goals. So according to the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, cultural responsiveness is an approach to viewing students' culture and identity, including race, ethnicity, and other characteristics as assets, as Nat was mentioning before, and creating learning experiences and environments that value and empower them. As conceived by leading scholar Gloria Ladson-Billings and informed by an evolving body of research, culturally responsive practices promote academic achievement and cultural competence for all students. So that's kind of the definition that we're working with. So the core elements of culturally responsive practices include building strong relationships with students, tapping into their backgrounds, prior experiences, cultural frames of reference, communication and performance styles to inform classroom activities, curriculum, and assessments. There's a book called Culturally Responsive Practicing, Isn't That Just Good Teaching? So you'll see, a lot of it seems kind of like just good teaching practices. So research shows that these practices make learning more relevant to students while maintaining rigor and raising student achievement for all students. The practices are aligned with DESE guidance and actually the Massachusetts Educator Rubric, which provides specific information about culturally responsive instructional moves and learning activities for teachers and students. So that's just kind of like the definition. Nat and Jess are going to talk a little bit more about the evolution of this work, in particular in our district.
Thanks. So, as Brenda said, all of this work falls under the Department of Ed's framework, and it's really important. That's one of the things that we've also that Jess will touch on as well, is working with our department chairs, how it aligns to our rubrics. So specifically some of the work that really led, we were talking about it last year, and we really wanted to work together, and through our summer R&D, it was approved that some of the work that came out of the DEI task force last year, there was a part of that was a professional development group that looked at research-based practices and explored different frameworks to guide our plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion work in our schools. So this summer, an R&D project that we put forth, and what we realized early on was a team from Memorial had put forth a proposal. Britta and I were talking about a proposal, and we all kind of sat down and was like, well, we need to do this all together. So it was fantastic. So Britta and I worked together with Sally DeGeorge from Memorial to plan across, and over 35 educators from all 5 schools across the district, including all the principals, and took some work over 2 days to do some academic grounding to gather perspectives. And the grounding was based off the work of both Geneva Gay and Zaretta Hammond, and take some time to reflect on our own practices, identifying areas for growth on the individual, building, and district level, thinking that we all have, no matter where we are in this realm of understanding, we all have a lot of work to do and to grow, and to really allow different entry points for our staff as well. And then also just taking time this summer to share resources and best practices. And that's led to some of the professional development work. And part of that is carving out intentional time, and all 5 buildings are taking time each month to carve out intentional time, what that looks like. It may look a little bit different, but just kind of so that we're making sure that we're all sort of singing the same songs, and talk about that for shared language, what that looks like. And Jess is going to talk about, from the teacher department chair level, some of the work that's been taking place.
So administration and faculty have been thoughtful and intentional in regards to culturally responsive practices at Blake and the high school. We've devoted time every month at faculty, leadership, and department meetings. It could be watching video clips, listening to excerpts from podcasts, reading articles or book excerpts, allowing time for activities, discussions, and sharing of ideas, with the understanding that we're all in different places. Teachers have strived to do this as well, and building community is one way. Whole school surveys and individual teacher surveys have gone out. We've added questions like, who would you be comfortable sitting next to, and what are your preferred pronouns? Pronunciation of names is also something we're working on. One teacher shared how she used the flip video, so students can submit a video where they pronounce their name and give a story of where their name came from. Other teachers have students introduce themselves instead of reading off the roster, so that the student can share how they pronounce their name. Getting to know you activities like games using GimKit or Kahoot to help students get to know each other in the classroom. We've also connected with families more. One teacher used a different language each time she sends out her weekly email. Others have added translation links to all emails and important documents. Guidance is using a variety of modalities to reach out to families. And we've made some curriculum changes to be more inclusive. We've included authors, artists, scientists of diverse voices. We're studying art, architecture, literature, and history through different cultural lenses and discussing how these works influence and reflect world events. And we're making learning relevant and meaningful, using local government and history in daily lessons, including students and their interests in math application problems, students working on their civics projects, or co-constructing the curriculum based on their own interests. And one particular art project at Blake, Honoring Your Ancestors, allows students to share some of their backgrounds. And now Brenda will continue with some ongoing action.
So as Jess was saying, right now we're focusing on professional development during faculty meetings. So we're basing our framework around Zaretta Hammond's culturally responsive teaching in the brain. She actually talks a lot about brain science. So we've been looking at kind of some videos about, how from scientists about how when students feel safe in a learning environment, it really kind of opens up their cortex, or their ability to learn is higher. So just kind of like the why of why this really needs to happen and why it's so important. So the first step in Zaretta Hammond's framework is awareness. So, the first couple of months of school, we've really been working with faculty about like their own lens and their own cultural background, their own frames of reference, and how that impacts their teaching. And if they were raised a certain way, their educational background, their upbringing, their culture, but also their experience with authority. All of these things, there's these cultural values and beliefs that really kind of frame interactions with students. So, it's important to spend time in the reflection process. We've been doing a lot of that. Some future topics for professional development. Culture responsive communication and information processing, with ongoing examination of the curriculum, like Jess was talking about, with an anti-bias lens, which is aligned with what the state is expecting us to do. Examination of the kind of deep diving into the culturally responsive teaching rubric. Amplifying student voice with focus groups and interviews. We actually did some this last week. And of course, family engagement and kind of strengthening the learning partnership between school and home. So as we move forward with this work, we aim to engage parents through site council and other avenues, as this is a really important aspect of culturally responsive practice. All right, Nat, back to you, Nat.
All right, so I'm just going to back what Brenda just said. So one of the key tenets of culturally responsive practices is family engagement. And that's something that has been also a true physical challenge in a lot of ways the last few years. But so really looking at what that can be, and from the true, I know the elementary principals talk about like the intent of site council, what the framework is, and really that's a big piece of it, making sure that families are part of it and the community is part of it. So one of the frameworks for our educator rubric that's true for all educators and administrators has to do with this, and just this is the quote from the Department of Ed's framework. The standard 3 is to partner with families, caregivers, community members, and organizations to promote the learning and growth of all students. And so really grounding what that looks like. So I want to thank Joe Robertson, who's one of our site council members, and he's going to talk about what that means and how from your perspective. So thanks, Joe.
So I am Joe Robertson. Thank you for your time. I have 3 daughters in the school system. I have a 7th grader, a 4th grader, and a 2nd grader. So I have warned Nat that I'm going to be with him for a while. I warned Robert earlier tonight too. So the site council, I know that you had an opportunity to hear from some of the parents from the elementary school site councils last month. So I don't, with your permission, I don't think I need to get into too much of the nitty gritty of the hows and whys of the council's existence. But at Blake, it is a great opportunity for parents and the administration and staff to interact, to have a bit of a two-way street, both on feedback and on insight. So it's a chance for parents to come to a bit of an informal setting and raise specific questions and general questions, and then get a little bit of the hows and whys as far as what's happening at Blake, how that fits into the larger picture, both or from an academic standpoint, SEL, feedback and reporting, top to bottom from kindergarten all the way up through the high school, to see how what is happening at Blake and what the staff at Blake is working on fits into that larger picture. So I appreciate your time. I first heard about site council from a lovely neighbor who had been on the council or had attended the meetings for a number of years and knew that I had a middle schooler coming up, and mentioned that she thought I'd be interested in attending the meetings, and I've gotten a lot out of it. So I appreciate the opportunity for parents of the respective site councils to come up and just share a little bit about the work that happens and encourage other parents to look into it. It's been a great learning experience, and as part of that, I think that it helps when I'm having conversations with my fellow parents, neighbors, folks in the community, and if there are issues or questions that they might have, I am better informed because of these meetings and am able to share some of that background on the work, the great professional development, the staff meetings, the department level meetings, and then the school-wide work that's happening to allow or answer some of those questions, but also to point folks in the right direction. So it's been a great experience, and I do think that it is a good example of that vision statement that Nat mentioned. That it's a two-way street to reach out to members of the community, parents, caregivers, and the community at large. And then finally, obviously, on a more tactical level, it gives parents an opportunity to help move things like the school improvement plan forward, provide feedback. We have spent, as you can imagine, a lot of time discussing in those meetings feedback and reporting and grading, and all of the work that has gone into that process. As I said, I feel better informed about it, which allows me to help spread the word a little bit. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Sort of next steps, so where we're at is the group that worked during the summer. All the team of educators has been great, and we've met. We'll be meeting periodically throughout the year, just to kind of make sure that we're all sort of keeping ourselves accountable, and also the process working forward. And one of the aspects that we've talked about administratively and teachers have talked about is wanting a vision statement for this work. So that's something that's been a process collectively that we've worked at as a group and kind of fine tuning, and we shared the draft at leadership last week. We have another meeting tomorrow. We'll be talking more about, and then kind of bringing it out. Does this represent the work? So we look forward to that. That should be kind of coming to fruition pretty soon. And just I'll end with, and this is the only quote I'm sharing tonight, but yep, you betcha, slipped it in. So this is from, Brenda mentioned too, Zaretta Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. And what she says is this, and I think it really does represent the idea of culturally responsive practices. So what she says is, culture, it turns out, is the way that every brain makes sense of the world. That is why everyone, regardless of race or ethnicity, has a culture. Think of culture as software for the brain's hardware. So that's like the soundbite that like people hold on to. Culture is software for the brain's hardware. The brain uses cultural information to turn everyday happenings into meaningful events. If we want to help dependent learners do more higher order thinking and problem solving, then we have to access their brain's cognitive structures to deliver culturally responsive instruction. So I just think it's a really nice encapsulation of the work that we're really endeavoring on. So I think that's it. Am I forgetting? All right. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Questions?
Where did it start? Like when you were saying a few minutes ago, you're now thinking about like a mission statement, but I'm a little. It spans the schools, or was it and just explain again how this started?
Yes. So I mean, there's a lot of terminology in education, and just hearing different pieces. And culturally responsive practices has actually been around for a good number of years, and I think a lot of the work it's a more encompassing term, similar to, I think, like multi-tier systems of support is now a terminology that's more encompassing of how do we support all students. So really, it's under the diversity, equity, inclusion umbrella. And really, the Department of Ed, I would say in the last 2 years, has really made a much more concerted statement. They've actually put out a culturally responsive teaching rubric for us to use to implement some of the practices. So I think there's a lot of, like Brenda said, a lot of it when people look at it, it's like, well, isn't this just good teaching? But it gives a framework from a cultural perspective to kind of start its work and thinking culture, that everyone has a culture. And if we tap into that, and I would say just like 2 key tenets are relationship building and also asset-based approach, which is kind of looking at that framework. So I think we had to live through this kind of adjustment time to get in a place where we can do some more formal work and to bring people a little bit more interest-based, but also the Department of Ed has taken a much stronger stance in saying this is part of the work that you have to do in schools. It's important to meet the needs of all learners and all families. Our community is diversifying and our staff is diversifying too. So it's a lot of that work that really ties into the DEI task force as well. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
We were saying that this year, if you look at the DESE statistics, what percentage of children of color do we have in the district?
14%.
14%. And when you came in, it was 8, if that. Yeah. So, and I've had that experience myself of going to a kindergarten back to school night and saying, this class is a different class than a class I saw even 5 years ago. And then I think that's a great thing. It shows that the community is, changing, and that, it's just a really nice development. And I can tell you that Halloween in my neighborhood is amazing. Like, I could literally look at my block and see 7 different countries, represented just right off the bat. Kids under 5 or kids under 7, and it's so much fun. The other thing I want to say is that so much of what you're talking about in terms of having kind of safety and having your frontal lobe, your cortex be able to be open is also a lot of what therapists have been talking about forever around kind of trauma-informed teaching, trauma-informed, and because that our kids have all, and our country and all of us have been traumatized within the last 3 years, that it is traumatic to be isolated, and it's particularly traumatic to be isolated as adolescents. And I think it's wonderful that you're looking at this as integrated for all children, for all of our students, for all of our staff, because it's a great time to be able to be so aware of the things our brains do to shut our learning down when we're scared, when we're not sure, and the kind of double dipping, I think, is a great thing. It's a good time to be kind of prying those brains open again. So, thank you.
Super. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty. Let's see. What are other tenants purchase agreement?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, in your materials, you see the letter of intent and some of the information related to potentially looking at a solar power purchase agreement and projects within the district. So Byron Woodman is here tonight. He'll be doing a short presentation, answering any questions. And I know that Susan McPhee, who's our consultant that we work with, is on Zoom, so she's following along there. I know members of the Energy Committee here as well. So happy to have Byron kick us off.
Hi.
Hi, Bobby.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. Join here as a panelist. Getting the presentation set up so that we can show it on the monitor here.
Great.
last week. It's on one of like 50 or 60 superintendents that are taking a course. It's called Ready Race Equity, Diversity, Inclusion. It's really powerful. So, we had our last class. It's all school year long. Our last class, we had to do a 3 to 5 minute presentation on our why, like why this is important for us and why to do it. You see everyone's background. It's great, really powerful stuff. So it's happening at all levels, and we're pushing along. So it's good for our kids.
I think about the first time that I kind of took a class on and kind of did some kind of work around DEI, which was in '95, and you just think about how much through time and maturity and different circumstances your stories and your whys change. They build on top of each other and they evolve, and so that's why this never actually stops. There's not like an end point
Right. No checkout.
to understanding. Yeah.
It'd be really cool to share these slides because there's photos. The solar. Yeah.
I was just going to do just a quick background.
Okay.
So Megan Sullivan's part of the subcommittee, correct?
Yep.
And the energy committee here in Medfield. So back in, I want to say last spring, with our consultant, Susan McPhee, we actually had a jump off because she had to go to another meeting. We were looking at different projects, solar projects in town, and they identified a few areas in the town, and 3 of the areas were here at in the school department. So one would be here at the high school, the middle school, and Memorial School. So tonight's presentation is just to talk about the 3 options, where we are and where we want to move forward. And I think the timing is perfect because I can tell you that our electrical costs will be going up. The state is gave us preliminary numbers to budget for 2024, and they're talking in the 64% increase for electrical costs statewide. So, and those are from the 2022 numbers, which were last year's numbers. They're saying that 64% the same for an increase for electrical cost. So, I personally, if I had to advise you, would be that these projects would help us bring those costs down on the school side, obviously on the town side also. So these are projects that I think we should consider and look at and hopefully do in the near future because we don't know where these costs are going to go. 64% is a lot. Superintendent and I haven't even sat down to say, are we going to budget 64%? Is that the number we want to use? Or, do we go out and do another study and see, what the numbers come up as? So we are locked in on the supply and demand side. The problem is that, we work with the broker, right, to lock in prices. But then on the Eversource side, their numbers will fluctuate,
right.
And that's where we're seeing the increases. So, do you want to add anything?
No, I think this is great, and we're so familiar too with PPAs and solar and more than you are, I imagine. So this will be great. We'll let Byron do his thing, introduce the topics to you. Hopefully, we won't use too many acronyms, and then be able to answer any questions that you have. How's that?
We're all set.
Yeah, I think we're all set. Thank you. So, my name is Byron Woodman, and I'm with Select Energy, and we have been working with Medfield to evaluate sites for a while now. And you know, as Michael mentioned, the broader context for this conversation is that energy prices are going up across the Commonwealth. In Massachusetts, it's some of the highest energy costs in the country. And then the specific area of Massachusetts is some of the highest energy costs within Massachusetts. And as you look ahead, that's coupled with environmental concerns, how to increase renewable energy. And Medfield has taken a leadership role in solar for probably at least the last 7 years or more. Select has been working with Medfield for at least the last 6 years to maintain the solar system at the wastewater treatment plant. Right now, we're actively building the solar project at the DPW under a very similar arrangement that we're going to discuss tonight for the schools. So as we work with municipalities, we start sort of at the 30,000 foot level. Susan McPhee drives a lot of the overall energy and sustainability initiatives. This is one component of that. And as we come in, we look at a variety of factors, including energy costs, potential locations, broader value add for the community, and then feasibility. So an example would be, you know, some of the buildings in town are historical in nature and have slate roofs under trees. And it's just, although solar might save money, it just doesn't make sense. And so other ones start to rise to the top where you have some big, beautiful parking lots with a lot of high energy demand and a lot of high energy costs. And we start to sift through and we say, okay, this one might make sense. And then, you know, this one might not, and we triage them. So we came up with a variety of sites that we feel are some of the best sites for the town. The majority of them are within the schools where we feel there's an educational benefit, a dollars benefit, and the environmental benefit. So that's kind of the broader context. Feel free to ask me any questions as we go through it. And I will be sensitive of your time tonight because I know you do have many items to cover. A little bit about, in this presentation, a little bit about Select, a little bit about the overarching program in which we operate called the Power Options Program, which is a large energy consortium. We'll talk about the specific projects and the economic of those projects, and then the discussion of potential next steps and the timing of those next steps, which is really important in terms of being able to secure the incentives to make the project happen, and then what a vote would entail. And so in terms of Select, we've talked about this a little bit, and we've been working, you know, we're based in Hopkinton. We've been building projects since 2009. I've personally been in renewables for over 2 decades now, first with wind energy and then with solar energy. My first educational solar project was at Smith College, and that was in 2009. And I've been focused pretty much on Massachusetts renewable energy development since. We have over 100 power purchase agreements with municipalities and nonprofits. So we are very familiar with the educational environment. We're very familiar with providing educational content for students, making solar accessible in a learning environment, and also what it means to navigate within an operating school and working with facilities to build these projects. Select has been working with Medfield for years, literally. And so this is a continuation of our engagement with the town. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of an energy group called Pattern Energy, and they are a large holding company that initially was primarily or is primarily invested in large renewable resources like wind energy. And then they decided that based on Massachusetts and the characteristics of solar, they wanted to enter into this market. So we were their first acquisition into the solar space. We've maintained all of our operations. We're still servicing all the projects that we build, and other projects where other developers or owners have asked us to serve those projects as well. And very importantly, we were awarded a provider of choice for the power options for the solar initiative. So Power Options is the largest energy consortium in New England for nonprofits. And as such, they'll go out and do large procurements and RFPs for different energy-related commodities, whether it's natural gas or electricity. But one of those is solar and renewable energy. And they have an extensive RFP process. We bid into that, and we've been selected as their vendor of choice for multiple years now. So we have a running relationship with them, and Medfield is a Power Options member. So all the agreements that we do with Medfield are in the context of the Power Options program. They're agreed and approved agreements, and it also caps essentially the amount of margin that we're able to make on a project. So it's incredibly competitive pricing that Medfield is able to receive. So in terms of not using too many acronyms, the concept is, and forgive me if everybody's familiar with power purchase agreements, but just super high level, towns, municipalities, any commercial account, any account is buying electricity from default energy providers or energy providers, and pricing changes over time. And what Select has been able to do is finance specific projects where we go and we'll finance a project, and then we're able to bring energy specifically from solar to the town at a lower rate than you typically pay. And that rate is locked in for a 20-year term for a roof or 25 years for a canopy. And so what you see is as the town looks ahead in terms of your purchasing plan, it becomes part of an overall portfolio where you have some energy coming in from solar, you're going to have some come in from the default utility provider, which is Eversource, and overall it creates a hedge and a savings across all your locations. And so specifically for the schools that we're talking about in this presentation tonight that are going to be the high school, Blake Middle School, and Memorial, the projects that we've identified and looking at represent about 85% of those three schools' overall annual consumption, which is tremendous. So it's not 85% of all schools, but 85% of those schools together. And as electrification continues, it's going to still be a very meaningful contribution to your overall energy portfolio. So we'll finance the project, we'll build the project, and once it goes live, then we just sell the energy to you at a discount. In terms of the kind of the process that we go through, and feel free to ask any questions as we go if that is helpful. So the overall process is project identification, which we talked about a little bit. There are a lot of sites in Medfield. And so the initial part of it was going through those sites, reviewing them with the Energy Committee, reviewing them with Susan and the town, and then coming up with the ones that we thought were best candidates. Then the next piece of that is securing or understanding the economics to it. So one of the big parts of the economics is the incentive that comes from the Commonwealth. And you essentially apply for that incentive. And it was established to reward the early adopters, to fuel the market, get people to advance with solar. So the earlier projects have the best awards. And so obviously we're incentivized, because the higher the incentive, then that also helps bring down the cost of Medfield's energy rate. So in applying for the award and also applying for the interconnection application so that Eversource can start to study the project and let us know kind of what the cost would be and feasibility for interconnecting, both Eversource and the Commonwealth need to see what's called a letter of intent. And the letter of intent, they just don't want providers going out and submitting applications if the host facility is unaware that those projects are likely to happen. So the letter of intent it's a letter of good faith. It's the intent of Medfield to advance with projects based on forecasted value. And it enables us to do our due diligence on the project. Assuming that the economics are different than what we had proposed or anticipate, Medfield can elect to proceed or not. But it's just, as in this phase, we start to put engineering time and resources and money into the projects. And the Commonwealth and Eversource are also invested in it as well too. So that's the intent behind, the letter of intent. After we do that, we'll come back to the town and Medfield, and we'll look at 3 documents. The power purchase agreement, which essentially says, the town would be buying energy at a specific rate over the term. Then the next agreement is a lease agreement, which essentially says you're aware that we're building the system on your property and you're authorizing us to use a property, the property in that way with a site plan, and it just shows exactly how the equipment would be installed. And then a notice of lease that we submit to the town and Commonwealth. Then we build the project. All these sites have great access. They're relatively easy installations in terms of ability to stage, ability to build projects. And then the idea would be hopefully to do, at least for the canopies, times when the students are not in session. So it could be as early as this upcoming summer if everything worked well and we had the approvals. Each project is on a case-by-case basis. So it's not, you don't have to advance with all of them. As we go, some may continue to move forward and some may hold. But we'll have that conversation as we advance. And then after the systems are installed, there's the local inspections. We go through a permitting process with the town, before and then following to make sure we have authorization to operate. And then sometimes we'll have a ribbon cutting event, have some students there, make it fun, Earth Day kind of dedication events, and make it part of the community and culture, which is like a big part of it as well. So that's the overall process. Yes.
So I'm curious, how long is the construction phase if you're doing a canopy set up in a parking lot? A couple of months?
It would be the active construction component would be a few months, and then after that things quiet down while the utility does its approval. There's electrical that's involved with it too. But the feel of the actual construction would be probably a few months. And then in a case like this, we cone off areas, we use temporary fencing. It's definitely that area when it's under construction is clearly marked as a construction site. And then we'll work with on-site staff to choose other locations for parking while that happens.
Do it over summer then, we probably go into the school year. If you start the last day of school, like we did our field over, school get out June whatever, we started that next day. testing was done 3 weeks before school started, so it would probably go into the school year. Just thinking about what
It may, and as we advance with the engineering, depending on how many footings we use and things like that, we can provide a pretty good estimate for what that would be for forecasting.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure, yeah.
First of all, I'm kind of a question about timing, but different than what Dr. Marsden was talking about. We're currently in kind of like an emergency patch situation with the Blake roof. If we were to try to do this project at Blake, would the town have to make Blake's roof a capital priority? And how would that timing work? And what is the kind of window for early adopters?
So
I noticed the pictures that Blake is on the roof, the only part that they put panels.
I noticed that too, but I just wanted to make sure. And then I also have a related question around heat burden in terms of having dark solar panels on a roof and how much heat that brings into a building that doesn't necessarily always have the most powerful air conditioning. What kinds of studies do you have around that, how it affects the internal temperatures? So while we're using more electricity, our systems may not actually be able to support that kind of exchange between comfort and those are some of the kind of more nitty-gritty questions I have that I think are fairly important.
no, I think so in terms of the timing for the roof, just that roof piece of it, based on our understanding is that there's a portion of the roof that needs to be replaced, that is scheduled and advancing for replacement.
Which would be the part that we're looking at right now. But the rest of it is not. Okay. But needs to be.
And so our assumption is that we would just be doing the portion, we would just be installing on the new portion. And part of that has to do with wanting to make sure that the footprint that the panels are on is consistent with the roof warranty. So part of that is in the setup, we make sure to honor the roof warranty. We get the roof warranty certificate, and so if we knew that there was going to be a capital project in the next 5 or 10 years to replace the rest of that roof, what we'd probably suggest is we do this piece now, and then as the roof is replaced, then would consider that or advance with that if and as it makes sense based on the incentives at that time.
And the second thing was around heat retention within the building. If you're having a dark surface on top of what is essentially kind of a light surface roof for specific reasons, what does that look like, and how? What's your experience been in terms of?
So the panel, that's a great question. It's a new question to me.
Yes.
I can tell you that the panels don't generate heat. And they are dark. A lot of the roof membrane itself is either a black or charcoal type membrane, and then you've got like a white TPO roof. The panels are not directly flush to the roof in this case.
Oriented like this, or
yeah, they're on a pitch, so there is ventilation and circulation around those modules.
Okay.
So I've never heard of it being a factor or a concern previously. I do know that from the UV rays, there are indications that the panels actually protect the roof surface from those rays in the area where the panels are. Now, obviously, there are gaps between the panels and things, but I have not heard of increased temperatures due to panels previously.
Thank you. And just one more question in terms of the pitch, particularly looking at Blake, in which there are some internal courtyards. Do you predict that there could be some significant overshading for those light sources?
No, and I can actually go to, if it's okay with you, I can skip ahead to the Blake canopy. Blake roof, just so I can show you. So the blue area, we can come back and see those other slides, but the blue area is where we have it. You can actually see that those panels would be facing south.
Okay.
And they would not be, they may not be visible at all from that courtyard. They may be, you might be able to see a tiny little bit of them from the top, but my guess is you wouldn't be able to see them very much at all.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Those are just my kind of immediate thoughts.
So I think we've pretty much covered most of the content in this slide previously, just as we were talking through different things. So some of the big trigger events for the project is obviously the letter of intent, the confirmation from the utilities, the power purchase agreement to review. We've recently reviewed that with town council. Within the last year for the DPW, we're expecting to use very similar language, which should save a lot of time. That's specific to Medfield. Obviously, we update the exhibits. Structural and feasibility, that's really important. Just to speak to a little bit, we do invest heavily in the feasibility part of the project. And for the school, working very closely with the roofing design and confirming weight loading as part of our due diligence process for that. And then in terms of the canopies, it's soil samples and the site conditions. We have our engineers have been to the site a couple times, each of the locations. I've been on all those site visits, and so we are fairly familiar with the sites from where we are today. System operation, these systems do require maintenance. We have a full NOC center or an operations center in Hopkinton, so they're all connected to the internet. If any work needs to be done, we get an alert and then we can dispatch the technicians that work from that office. So just a little bit in terms of like the specific projects we had looked at and the footprint. So the blue area here is obviously the location of the specific footprint of the panels. What you're seeing here is what's called a long span canopy. So it actually would go over the drive lane. The height of the canopy is 13.6. So emergency vehicles can drive underneath it. Plows can go underneath it. It's regular highway height. And we would obviously have review the plans with the fire chief so that, the fire chief can sign off on it or provide any questions. The playing field is there, so we want to make sure that the emergency vehicles feel like they have the access they can, but everything we've seen, there's plenty of access to this site. Again, it would be sloping to the south. Any water runoff would be running off to the south there, and mostly snow. These are not watertight canopies, so there are a little space between the panels. But on a snow or snow slough, in this case, it would be going off into that field off the edge of the parking lot there. Their savings starting in year one, this represents 66% of the overall high school's usage. $4,500 of projected savings in year one, and over 700,000 over the term, and 8,500 tons of CO2 avoided.
So what kind of, like Michael, you said earlier, 64% increase. Like what kind? How do you calculate the savings?
Yeah. So
how do you model that?
So in terms of the percentage of use, you understand from just projections. The
percentage of use makes sense.
In terms of the tons of CO2.
The 64.
Okay, dollars saved. Yeah, so the dollars saved. What you do is you look at the PPA rate from this project, or the energy rate that we would be selling it to the town, and then the current rate that the town is currently paying for electricity now, and then that times production, and that establishes the year one savings. And then there's a 2% escalator, which is fairly conservative, but that's the Commonwealth suggests a 2% escalator on annual energy cost. And so we apply that energy escalation. So our rate stays fixed for the term. And in this case, so for the high school, the PPA rate is about 11.84 cents is what we're forecasting. Right now, energy here for competitive energy pricing plus distribution and transmission is around 12.5 cents, a little bit north of that, like now. And so when these systems go online, and that's what the savings was based on, but when these systems go online, like next summer, those energy prices are already going to be significantly higher. Yeah, that's right. So these calculations are conservative, but that's the process for calculating the energy savings.
When do you lock in? If they go up 64% next year, and that's your baseline.
Yeah, no, it's based on this. No, it's based on this year's numbers. But to your point, these numbers here, the PPA rate is what we would be forecasting and including into the letter of intent, and our base marker with the town. But if we were to come back and all of a sudden there were unusual soil conditions, or Eversource said, well, geez, this is going to require a substation upgrade that's $500,000 or something, then it opens up that conversation for the town to say the impact for that upgrade would be X. Would you still want to proceed or not? But it is entirely up to the town to elect how they would want to proceed in that case. But the assumption is, based on the energy rates that we're assigning to this project, these are conservative savings numbers.
It would be accurate to say, though, that your development of the PPA rate is independent of the rate that we're currently paying?
Oh, is entirely independent. Yeah, the PPA rate that we are proposing is based on the capital cost of the project. It's based on the tax credit at the federal government level, and it's based on the incentives from the Commonwealth, and then the cost of the technology. So those are really kind of the four pillars that go into establishing the PPA rate.
All right, have you ever had a situation where you want to move in a municipality and do a project and there's resistance in the community? Has that happened to you folks? And then the project doesn't go through?
The visibility to projects up front is essential. I mean, working with the Energy Committee, working with the schools, the teachers. By the time a project advances, I think those conversations have largely happened. And we do work very closely with the community. So if I don't think we've ever been in a situation where it's prevented a system from advancing, but I can say that we have worked very diligently with stakeholders who are either leaning into a project or just have questions like how does it work, or if there was a proposed school location that was going to be in the footprint of a canopy, then you choose another site. And one of the things that Medfield really has going for it is the number of sites that you do have. And it is a portfolio approach. So we would advance with multiple sites, expecting hopefully that they could all move forward at once. But the understanding is as we advance, that would be validated and confirmed by the community.
I have a quick question for Dr. Marston and Michael. So what I'm seeing here is that it does not necessarily look as though we would need to put a bond forward on behalf of the school to purchase. You know, you're doing so kind of like what are the mechanics around
so
annual town meeting, budget, things that happen in terms of, say, there were some serious or somewhat expensive issues around being able to install some of the site things, or
there would be no expectation for the town, unless you elected to buy the system yourself, but as proposed, there's no expectation that the town would put any resources. You wouldn't be required for any upgrades. You wouldn't be required to do any repairs except for the roof, which is already being contemplated or attended to. But aside from that, there's no out-of-pocket expense. So everything, all the financing for a project is for select.
And that includes also, site preparation in terms of, should there be soil that wouldn't necessarily be particularly, that would need upgrading or any of those things. That would be part of the construction cost that you guys would take on.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Do you want to add anything?
Well, I'm just waiting to just say that's why we're dealing with this kind of readily.
Mhm.
Like, what can we move forward with now? You can move forward with PPA approach with a vendor that's already been selected by the state. You can move forward with the consortium. And it doesn't require any. So when you get to think about the roofs, we have to do the roofs have to be repaired before you do the consortium. And that's going to be a big capital project. So can't do it now.
This has to be done anyway. It's not something that has to get
They're
done.
definitely going to be done, and that comes first. Roof for the school, or all those MSBA questions. But this gives us an opportunity to work solar and relocation. Pretty similar. So that's the problem.
And from whatever happens with the elementary school configuration and projects and however that goes, I'm assuming that it would be smartest to have the same vendor that the town would probably want to do that if we were to be installing solar within that project in a more integrated way.
They are not to be completed. Yeah. We're just talking about
Straight ahead what we got right now. Okay.
There are a lot of questions about whether it's better to own the systems ourselves.
Mhm.
Plant, police station, or do the EPA, trying it out.
Mhm.
So,
Okay, bless you.
like now to move forward, our option is EPA.
Well, I mean, I think 64% is a pretty good reason to move forward sooner rather than later in a lot of ways. Thank you for answering.
I think the good thing to remember too is, 8 or 9 years ago, we did the power option here, because when we got here, Michael went down and talked to Mike Sullivan about it, and we were getting gas from this vendor and trash from this vendor, and we started consolidating all that. So I think that we worked well with the town on this. I just get concerned it's different, it's new, and it's a project. So I get a little concerned about issues that might arise from that. So
I think as long as we're not calling our parking lots open space, we should be okay.
you never know.
But I don't know.
Weird things happen. We'll see.
Stranger things have happened.
The sites. This is a high school. This is the middle school. The use of the middle school lots. Two separate canopies there, and they'd be joined. They'd be combined together.
Mhm.
And then the memorial. It's another long span canopy there, and it'll be connected also behind the meter directly into the electrical room. We walked in, and that's a very very straightforward installation there from everything we've seen. There are some utility pipes there that we just would mark around with DigSafe and be aware of those, but aside from that, it is very straightforward. This is one we already saw for the middle school, and the timing, a lot of the savings from a rooftop project, the PPA rate is typically lower. So even though this is a smaller footprint, it will have, I did not present savings with this just because we didn't have all the information yet on the roof replacement, but I would expect the savings to be very meaningful for this site. And then there's a potential to evaluate a canopy over the bleachers if the school committee was interested in this. This is would certainly be a leading project in the Commonwealth. And as we walked around this with the electrical team, there were a number of coincidences which made this possible that may not have otherwise. One of them is that there's an empty conduit that literally runs from the location where the media center is all the way out to the food concession stand where you'd be interconnecting. So that's where the meter is for that. So this would have its own dedicated, behind the meter at the concession stand. You'd be running down there. I think it may be eligible for a grant. We have not submitted for one, but from a leadership perspective, I think it could be a very compelling statement, and I think it could be really enjoyed and keep the fans out of the sun. And so we'd be really excited about looking at this with Medfield. And then the other one, which is sort of an architectural design, would be possible, maybe even like a little sidewalk canopy or something to take a look at where the schools connect. But again, the idea is, how do you bring it into the school? How do you make it real and fun for the students, and how to kind of optimize that? So we would look at both of those as well too, the school committee's kind of evaluation. But that's the presentation. So we would, yes.
Yes, a step further from what Dr. Marsden was asking in terms of community buy-in. For example, memorial. What is the communication that would go out to abutters, or again, to anything can happen, as we know, and in terms of getting buy-in from the get-go, so that we do not encounter obstacles. What have you done in the past with other communities of, whether they think it's an eyesore or what have you?
Well, typically, almost always we will follow the leadership of the host. So you know your community and the residents, and however you've advanced with other large, building projects in the past, and what we would typically do is a presentation like this. The select board would typically need to sign off on it. There are oftentimes members who are in support of that would like to make a recommendation that the select board vote in favor of it. So typically there are articles that a community is looking at it. I've personally not gone to door by door and done like a leaflet or anything like that. But in a fairly tight community, I think they would be aware that the project was going. But if there are any specific concerns or specific neighbors or anything that we need to address, that would kind of be on a case-by-case basis. And it's more about just answering questions, because this canopy isn't incredibly high. It's nothing that, would be throwing either glare or light or anything else. So it's, we would not expect a situation, but would take would follow your lead.
I think that actually, as I look at Memorial, I think that if we were to anticipate anything there, for instance, there could be some use around, potentially shifting just a little bit to be able to then make that drop-off cover, in inclement weather, so that we're kind of integrating the purpose and the infrastructure into a purpose and a convenience for families. That there's potential there just around simple shifts, depending on whatever your kind of engineering is. But I think there are ways that you can look at this and make things more convenient for families and for kids. In particular, when I was looking at the sidewalk, I like the idea of actually being able to have a physical connection that's visible between the middle school and the high school. We do have kids who walk back and forth for music programs and stuff like that. There are things that are convenient there that also help the community work.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about lessons learned.
Oh yeah.
From our last project that failed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, community engagement well before it gets to an article, you know, in terms of meetings or what have you, just again to really make sure people are engaged and know what's happening before it gets to town.
This would need, and that's a good point. This would need town meeting approval too. Just on the lease portion of it.
I'm just looking like who signs the letter of intent, and then your little map there, and then what else needs to be signed.
Well, the superintendent is how we had considered it being signed. It could be signed at the town level, but we would look for your guidance. Yeah, absolutely.
Because the property is under the custody of the school committee, you can authorize the superintendent to sign the contract on your behalf. Okay.
And then I'm just looking at the, whatever it was like slide 4, the little green arrows. After your letter of intent, what else would need to be signed in order to?
Okay. After the letter of intent, the next documents would be administrative, just in terms of us filing the applications to Eversource and for the application, the smart application, and then at the town level, to put the agreement into effect, there'd be the power purchase agreement, then the lease agreement, and notice of lease. And when at the custody, I mean, I believe it would be Medfield Public Schools.
It would be because we have custody of the property. So you have custody of the property as a school committee. You know, it does have to go to town, meeting. There was an article, I think it was 2 years ago, that the Board of Selectmen did get authorization from the town meeting to go into an agreement. We're looking into that right now to see if that also stands for this project on the school side.
Who will drive the communication to the public? Would that be school committee, or is that energy committee?
I think we have to figure this out together.
Okay.
Because we've been, as an energy committee, we've been thinking about like, what can we do? Where can we do it? And we're like, Christine, we're ready to go. And she's like, wait a minute, this is a school project. We have to come back, talk to you guys here at the school. And I think your thoughts here about communicating and what people are going to want are really good ones. And we're going to balance the opportunities for savings and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions with, maybe these big structures. So we have to weigh that and get that messaging out and do some of that conversation. So we certainly would be, willing to, want to work with you to make that
So
happen.
we don't want to be left alone with that.
Yeah,
And then think, oh no, another thing.
No, it's
Plus,
definitely a group
we
thing.
are going to be working within the SBC kind of purview, so that all of a sudden we've got a little bit of message confusion.
Yep.
And I just want to make sure that
Mhm.
the messages of the SBC, which are again are a separate organization than the school committee, but it is all school-based projects, and I think that sometimes this can be confusing to our
Right.
to our constituents across the board.
So I did want to just point out two reasons that we are here to try and get things to move forward. And one is that as Byron said, the earlier you get into these programs, the higher the incentives.
Right.
And then also once we get in, say you sign the letter of intent for all these things, and we started to proceed, right? They did a little design work. We started to talk to the community, all this kind of stuff. If we didn't want to go forward, you don't have to go forward. So you might say, okay, in the end, we'll do 3 out of the 7 or whatever. So there's still the opportunity for that. But if you don't get in and get the incentive, block it off now, then you're not, you're just going to get a lower incentive.
So where's the warrant committee on this right now? Have they evaluated it, looked at it? Is on their
You know,
Radar?
we are in like this new territory about, you know, making these things work and bringing groups together to talk about this kind of stuff.
I mean, but in order to get it on town meeting, like baseline, you know, we can have our own kind of discussions around the financial and kind
Okay,
of,
yeah,
you know,
nice.
purpose around it. But in order to get it anywhere near town meeting, the warrant committee and the select board need to be talking about it, have it fully on the radar, and need to be getting it processed now.
So I can answer that question. So the same presentation I was told will be scheduled for the select board in a couple of weeks. So it's going to go in front of the select board because there are town projects on this
Okay.
same, I'll call it one project. And once it goes to the select board and if they decide to put an article, then it will go to the warrant committee for their review.
Okay.
So we're moving through the stages.
Mhm.
We try to put it on the agenda earlier because we feel that it's a great project that's going to help us. It's going to save us money going into, call it a recession, because that's what's going to happen. So we want to be ahead of the game. And then I was talking to the town administrator, Christine, and she said that it's going to be on the select board agenda, I believe, in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so when's our next meeting?
November 17th.
So this is something we probably need to return to.
I was thinking we would vote on the 17th.
Yeah. I mean, I
Which
think,
is 2 days after the select board meetings, I think they're meeting on the 15th.
I do believe so.
all right, so would that timing work
That's still within that
out?
realm.
It's still
Oh,
within
sure.
their realm?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, like, I mean, my view is to vote. I would just like to better understand that how you, like, I add up the savings. I see 1.477 from the numbers you see over 25 years. I think there's a couple areas that you're saying on projects you haven't calculated it. I did just like the 446, 323, and 708.
Right. Yeah. Right. So the 1.477 million is for the canopy projects alone, and
Okay.
it is not inclusive of the other ones.
So yeah, correct. So I think one is just better understanding. Like Michael, my assumption is you're doing some of the high level analysis. Hey,
So
those figures seem reasonable.
If you look at the 11 cents, because that will be our new contract rate, which is through power option, and then you calculate what the costs are going to be, right? Or what we know what the costs are now. That's where you're going to see your savings, and then
I think it would be considerably higher. Right?
I think if we lock in this rate with the way the prices are going, I think our savings will be greater.
Yeah, much
Yes.
greater. And I'm just saying though, it would be helpful to, you know, like just being responsible, understand what we think we're going to get, so we know that.
Yeah,
Just
we
better understand what the process is.
we can put a spreadsheet together.
Which process are you referring to?
That what you just spoke to. So if we said, hey, you know, it would be great to sign the letter of intent. What else needs to, you know, what other approvals need to be
Oh,
had within the town?
Yeah.
More than the conversation we had, just part of that presentation. This is where it would go. Letter of intent. Does it go to BOS or where else does it go?
I think those are great questions.
So there would
Definitely need to.
there would be two letters of intent, one signed by the select board, one signed by the superintendent on behalf of the school committee.
Yeah.
And then those two letters would go forward.
And each project would have a separate letter of intent as it's going to advance. Each project
In other words,
would,
canopy here at the high school as well.
yeah, and each one is going to be financed specifically based on the specifications of that project.
So you can see the rate changes a little bit for each project.
Yep.
and then
Yeah.
see what
Exactly.
Like I look at it, you
Steel
look at the,
is.
you know, the high school one. It's 708 right there and then with the canopy. It seems like that
So,
would be
for example, when we were talking, Tim, that let's say we go with the canopy over the bleachers, okay, that would pay for the lights for the field, plus the concession stand, plus the lights we believe in the parking lot. So that would pay for that cost just by doing the bleachers, the canopy over the bleachers, just so you get a sense.
Could we also upgrade the shack electrical system? And say, it could also save us some money on a bus back to Westwood to play the second half of the game. Sorry.
The any service upgrades, if we had to increase the electrical panel, that's part of the project. If we needed to.
We had an unfortunate incident, which our kids had to go back to Westwood to finish a game.
Got it. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah, where else have you seen? I mean,
So Lincoln Sudbury has it. Ashland has it now.
Never seen it.
We could reach out to Heather and see what the process was. We could reach out to Heather and see what the process was like. Wouldn't she have been a part of it?
You're right. Perhaps. When did Lincoln Sudbury do their project? Long time ago? Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is the public records request discussion.
That was something that Leo put on. Do we want to go?
Yes,
Okay.
I think so. I spoke to Leo today, and essentially, the reason behind his was number one, transparency in terms of requests for records, and also simply streamlining access to this versus sending an email, and just this takes a lot of time.
It does.
From particularly Michael, and but he would like to request, and I agree with him, is to just have it accessible on our website.
I think so. I think actually it's really important whenever somebody does a public records request that we simply release it to the entire public, so that there's not just one person holding information, that it can be seen as transparent across the entire community. The requests themselves, not the documents, because I really think that the documents.
That's why I'm asking for verification.
Right. I honestly, we can put the requests on there. I would like to see, and I haven't thought about what we would need to do to, assuming that the request is granted and that it doesn't involve student privacy. And I think it's important that when we do a public records request and we release records, that does not become the kind of the holding of one person, and that the entire community then gets to know and be able to evaluate that information on their own. I mean, I don't think that's.
Yeah.
Are we all talking about the same apples?
I believe so.
Beautiful. Great.
So is that possible?
Sure, nothing wrong.
Have a file.
What do you want?
Have a file.
Is there anything about this that strikes anybody as? I mean, I don't want to just immediately say yes, because I want to figure out, is there anything in this that is that I'm not thinking of, that we're not thinking of in terms of
Student privacy
release?
is important. So if there's
Right.
anything that reveals any student privacy, we have to
That's
redact it.
redacted.
Right. Is that an additional burden to you, Michael? Because ordinarily we would redact that anyway. Come on over.
Thank you.
No, I mean, I would be working with Andrew to put it on the website. I just would need to know where on the website you would like it. And then if you want it as a hyperlink, because we can do it that way also.
I mean, I think that would be helpful. We can certainly have those conversations around procedures, but in terms of,
I mean, Andrea, we worked directly posted with that website day in, day out. Do you have a suggestion of where it would be in terms of accessibility?
My suggestion would be right in the front.
Yeah.
So when
Community page?
so when they go onto the district site, then there's an area that says, important links, I believe it is, that you can find it right there.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It's good. And then we can just hyperlink them.
So you wanna go forward, or you wanna go back, like go back a couple of years, like how do you wanna do this?
In a couple of years.
I would agree. Go forward in a couple of years,
Yeah.
makes sense.
We don't have to formally, I mean, it just will be a file online.
I mean, the deeds have already been done on a go-forward basis. We would simply institute it. But, I think that public information should be exactly that, public information. And we have the capability and the technology to be able to do so. And I think it actually links with the discussion that Tim has asked to have about public input as well. So maybe we'll bring that up when that gets there.
Alright, so any questions on this issue?
Sure.
Just curious as.
Actually, can you go up to the microphone, state your name, address, all that good stuff?
Bruce Beardsley, 10 Hickory. How are you tonight? Thanks. Just a question to clarify, because these are public records, and it just based on your discussion, it sounds like is your intention to sort of index these as requests, as distinct from to me, the logical way to index them would be what's the subject matter, and it would be posted on the website of the school committee under that subject matter rather than a litany. I mean, I can't imagine how many requests you guys have had through the years. So I guess point of clarification, just what is it that you're intending? Are you intending just to say, here are the list of an index of 100 requests and here's the answers, which to me I would think would be cumbersome for folks to go through and make sense of, versus here's the subject matter of these 100 requests divided into these buckets of various subjects and index it in a way that I would think would be a lot easier to manage, and hopefully, I mean, attendant to all of these requests and the hassle and the expense, hopefully the benefit is if the stuff's posted there and it's accessible, you don't have to deal with it again. People can just say, hey, now this type of stuff is newly added to the school website. I can find it. So just a question and something to think about.
Michael, would you have a thought on that one, please?
I do, because I can tell you that we are tracking it on a spreadsheet. The way we track it is the requester's name and the date of the request, and the subject line on the when it comes in through an email.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we track it currently.
Track the number of hours that staff spend.
And the hours, yeah.
So Michael was in charge of that.
Because there is a cost to this as well. I mean, there's a cost burden, a personnel burden, so that's important to our budget to know.
So Michael was in charge of that, but, people ask me for emails, ask Owen for emails, ask Christine for emails, ask the principal for emails. I mean, the one we're doing right now.
And the one we're doing now, I think it involves about 30 individuals.
Yeah, I mean, it's every hour you spend on it is an hour you're not spending on other things.
All on kids.
I think it's important,
But that's not really why we would do it.
We need
would
to
simply
crawl.
want-
It's just binary.
Yeah.
Let's crawl. Binary is anytime these requests come up, we share them. Like at least that's a baseline. I haven't done the analysis, but I know every hour. you
So
guys
would it
spend
be
is-
easier then to do it by the request date versus trying to index them?
So currently we have it, that's how we have it.
Right, okay.
We go back to 2019, I think. Right now, we go back always.
Yeah, paper files that go back long.
Yes, we do.
But is it categorized by theme as well, or?
No, it's just by date, requester, and then the subject line item that comes in through the email.
I mean, I think that's one of those things that administratively we can work out. Again, it's kind of like what Megan says about capturing the time and the opportunity, and then we can kind of figure out how we do it. But it's a good suggestion. Thank you, Bruce. Obviously, we want to make it as accessible as possible. but first we want to make it accessible, you know.
Because like I said, we can hyperlink the documents under the subject matter.
Mhm.
So when you go onto it, you'll see the date, you'll see the requester, and you will see the subject matter, and then you can hit that, and all the documents would be under that subject matter. It's whichever way you guys feel.
The school committee, right?
Sure.
A lot of them are multiple requests in the same request. So
Mhm.
for documents A, B, C, it could be the date, the name, and document.
So for example,
So what do we do with that?
yeah. So for example, we have a request that comes in, we provide documents. They then ask for more information, which becomes a second request. Then they'll ask for more information, which becomes a third request, and we have a few of those.
But the subject line
It's the same.
ordinarily says public records request
And then it
for
says for A, B, and C.
X, Rocky Woods,
Yep.
or this, or
Correct.
Parks, or whatever. And
So then we just take all those because it's the same request and
Mhm.
hyperlink it into one.
because a lot of the time, actually, the subject matter too is kind of very specific to the asker's priorities, and so it may be documents in a wide range asking for. I mean, I think we've had some that are like every school committee document between March something and March something else. Yeah, like, and those are a huge trove and almost impossible to completely kind of have a taxonomy to how we would release those. So, I mean, I think we do our best first and then we do better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
All right. That's good.
That doesn't need to be a vote or anything, right? We're just good? Okay.
Learning space at the elementary schools.
So included in your packet, the memo from earlier October, this was first on the agenda, just kind of looking at the elementary school space issues and kind of the status report of where we are at the elementary school. So I know we brought that up prior. So just to go over where we are, a memorial school for this year, we have 47 general education students who are on the preschool wait list. I think it was 65 or something last year. I mean, that number fluctuates, but enough to have multiple classrooms in preschool, we just don't have now because of the space. Our 4-day preschool programs are at full capacity for special education students. 2 preschool teachers are sharing 1 classroom, so that's tricky, right? You have 2 teachers, same classroom, alternate schedule, materials and students' materials and that kind of thing. It gets really tricky. Health, music, and art are sharing 2 classrooms, so there's a rotation that goes in there as well. There's no conference room anymore for memorials. That's used at the special education office. 3 staff members are now sharing the back hall space behind the actual space between the nurses area and the main office. We put desks in there. We have staff working in there. The library is being used to pull out reading support. So if you go in the memorial library, in the far left-hand corner, we have partitions in there and there's pull out reading services going on there.
First question.
First grade classes are 23 and 24, which is good size class for first grade, and we don't have any issues really with kindergarten at this point. Issues with kindergarten. Class size is fine, and space is fine, not an issue at all.
Can I ask some questions about that
Sure,
first
yeah.
tranche there? Okay, what's our revenue loss conservatively around not being able to have the 47 general education students, even if they were 2-day a week?
Yeah, it depends on what program
Kids.
they were in. Obviously, if it was 4-day a week, it'd be a lot more. I think we played around with this last year between $2,000 and $3,000.
Okay.
But I don't have an exact number in front of me, but we have played around with it.
Okay.
I mean, you
That's
gotta.
what I thought.
I feel like when you bring that factor in, though, like some people that are in the 2-day program want to be in the 4-day program.
That's
They're
true.
just happy to get in. Period.
Sure.
Can you give me a ballpark? I know you don't have this right in front of you. There's no way you could. But can you tell me how many kids are generally ID'd in K or first for services, IEP, enhanced kind of early kind of first stage kind of crisis 504? Because I wonder if by not being able to have as many kids who want to be here, we're losing opportunity time for intervention. And that makes me crazy, because I have to say that this entire list, everybody's squished for space, but it's the kids who are the most vulnerable and the teachers who need to work with them who are squished the most across all three. And it's the nature of the beast. But I really feel like early identification, particularly right now, is so important.
Absolutely, we want our kids in the building.
Yeah.
So we'd rather have our 3 and 4 year olds going to a memorial school than a private preschool.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons, but one of them is what you highlighted is being able to identify any support that kids need early on and providing that to them instead of
Right.
finding out when they're 6 or 7.
Right.
So
Which,
because
you've kind of lost a window there.
we value and we would like to do. It's
Yeah.
really, we had talked about, looking at different grade configurations of our schools.
Yeah.
And looking at having Memorial being a pre-K building.
Right.
So you could have all that space. We went through this a few years ago, and you would have enough space to do all the preschool programs you wanted, all the K programs you wanted. You could do transitional preschool and K, which is
The transitional program would be astounding for
we
kids.
have all that space, but we don't have that now. We're not going to have it for a while,
Right.
so we need to do something. If we're serious about early education, and we want to make sure that these 47 and the 62 the next year and the 40s, we want to make sure those kids are in our preschool, that we need to do something with their space.
Right.
So whether we add a modular to Memorial and create some preschool space that way, I don't know. I don't know any other option right now because we're using every nook and cranny in Memorial. We saw that during the pandemic. We were trying to provide space for kids.
Very creative.
Get them back in. And
Yeah.
we really went through every part of that school to try to do that. So, right with the preschool playground.
Playground is, yeah.
There's a nice flat area over there where we could put one.
Mhm.
Preschool only if we wanted to, or
Right.
and it would work great.
I mean, that could even be like an early childhood kind of, or whatever, yeah. There are all sorts of
So
things
I mean,
to
just
do there.
something to think about. I mean, the problem is, and I mentioned this to NMA when we were talking about this before, the timing of everything. So
Right.
preschool deposits are starting to happen in private preschools now. Parents are putting their names in here, and then we wouldn't know until late spring whether or not we would have funding to even do modules, right? So if we took the money, deposits, people are counting on us, we'd have to do some real shuffling.
It'd be a nightmare.
So what would, I think we have it somewhere, like effectively the ROI. I mean, the first year may not work.
Mm-hmm.
Year 2, 3, like, what's the cost of the modular? What's the revenue of it?
I think we
Preschool.
went
We could
through the
maybe work
modulars.
within, 4 years. Is that what we talked about, Michael? If we put one in. One is the classroom. Yeah, so 2 classrooms, and then the return on investment in terms of getting that back, the cost back was, I forget how many years. I want to say it was 4 years, but I don't want to be quoted on that because I'm here from, so I want to make sure that I have the exact thing. Yeah. Right.
Who's in the back hall space? Are they student facing or are they admin?
Admin technology folks.
Okay. And I was glad to hear that we have at least some separation, but do we need to make that more substantial or permanent for pull-out reading support within the library? Is that something we need to be looking at in terms of
Additional space? Sure.
Yeah? Okay, so, because it's unlikely
That's
that,
what the library was made for,
yeah.
It's working, but it's not great when you have
It's
a
not
library
great.
class in there.
Right.
And a librarian working with those students, and then you have reading specialists working with students in the back
Right.
corner.
Yeah.
It's not ideal.
It's not ideal, so, are there ways that we can think about carving out more permanent space within the library to do that? And I'm sorry if I'm making anybody sad about that. It's a lovely space, but, and then, is there any indication of issues around next year at Wheelock if we have first grade class sizes at 23, 24? What's that gonna look like as we bump up?
Yeah, we're working with the principals now on that, with the budget
Mhm.
preparation, so.
But we have enough space at Wheelock to be able to add a classroom if we need to? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's why that model was gonna be so successful, is you'd have that grade 1 and 2 at Wheelock, and then 3, 4, 5 at the new building. It was set for 50 years.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thinking behind that, and but now we just gotta make it work the way we're doing it. So, but Wheelock's in, they say, it's in good shape. You know, you have the 2 gymnasiums there, so you have simultaneous.
I got an idea for that gymnasium.
You got lots of classrooms. We have 8 at each level right now with access rooms. We're in good shape.
Okay. Okay. Hit Wheelock. That was my list for this one.
And then,
Thanks.
you know about Dale Street, so many of the classroom spaces are undersized. We have health, Spanish, and Mandarin are all in the cart right now. Our music program utilizes the vestibule, hallways, back music room behind the stage, which is just redone. That's what the leak was. We had to have a module because of that. And then a small general music room, which is really, really undersized.
Yeah.
Ensembles, strings, band, and chorus take place in the cafeteria gym in the back music room. We have no meeting space where parents, teachers, and staff hold IEP meetings. Most of the time they use Steve's office, and he has to go somewhere else. Technology staff are now in the basement. So when you walk into Dale Street,
Not in the boiler room, right?
no, that's like before it. So you
That's
go
scary.
down those 3 or 4 stairs, and there's a straight ahead room there with no windows or whatever. That's where they are right there.
And that's also our OT and English language learners are downstairs in
They're
a.
not in there.
They're in a kind of windowless
They're in a small room.
small room.
Actually, the old superintendent's office that was years and years ago that was used there. The modulars that were installed 22 years ago is still in use for our 2 5th grade classrooms. Makerspace and library, they share the same space, and I know the MCP is working hard to fundraise to get a movable wall there that would free up the area so you have 2 separate spaces over there for kids to work. And then our OT and English language learners share the old central office space, and we also use that room for nursing moms as well. We have on staff, so it's an old space that used to be superintendent's office. It was a nurse's office in the original building that was a high school in the 40s. So it's an old space there, but we're trying to make the best of it there. I mean, we know the Dale Street story, so it's.
Can I ask a couple questions about
Yeah.
Wheelock? And I know that over time we've talked about this as we've been kind of figuring out around space. But PT and OT are still sharing a space behind the stage.
We all.
At Wheelock,
Yes, correct.
yeah. Is there any way, and did we ever look at whether there was a way to kind of take, again, a piece of the Mango Gym and be able to have a dedicated, separate PT, OT equipment space there? I don't know if that's something that we can think about. There's a kind of a, when you think about getting OT and PT and the kids who need it, and it just seems to me that putting behind a partition on an old stage without windows is just, we have to be able to do better somehow.
Right, Holly's working on that because I know that she wants to make that a usable stage for performances.
Yeah,
for kids,
yeah.
So I know that she's working on that. One of the things that I know she's looking at is dividing up one of the classrooms upstairs that is now shared with a couple of reading specialists and special education, and making that the space that's useful as well. It's nice sized classrooms up there in some
Yeah.
areas, so.
So there's some potential for moving that along and then making that a better
Oh, I think so.
alternative for kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely working on that.
Great. I'm really glad to hear that. And then is there any issues around confidentiality or guidance, spacing needed because they're sharing a space, or the speech language and BCBA sharing space at this
I
point?
think we're good shape.
Okay.
Yeah, Wheelock's in really good shape as far as space.
If we move that stage space, I'd be stoked, but great. Okay.
Yeah, concerns just really are, in my mind, are memorial and what we know about that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And thank you for, I didn't mean to pepper you quite so much with those, but
Is there going to be a consideration of getting something in capital budget?
Yes,
Okay.
because we're gonna submit that in when we start. I know that's, Amy's gonna do some of the cost for it, she's out right now, so.
When you say submit that in, what's the that in there? What are you looking to submit into the capital budget specifically?
Well, we haven't finalized all
Modulars?
that.
but plural
Mike, do
and
we
where?
have any?
Sorry. Here it comes again.
So it is up to me, it's new lights at the high school,
Okay.
because we need those desperately, new poles and lights. It's additional money for the baseball field at the high school, closed down, unplayable at this point. We've had to do a lot of repairs on that, and there's issues around, supply chain that we just haven't had it fixed yet, we've tried to. I think those are really important. Modulars at Memorial would be something I would put in there too. And then there's a whole zillion host of things we have in that 5-year capital plan that Michael was talking about.
So yes, so we have to submit a 5-year capital plan every year, according to our 20-year that has to be updated. And so those items that Dr. Marsden spoke about have to fit in that 5-year plan. But we have to make adjustments because there were certain emergency items that did come up that have to be addressed sooner than later. So those items will take priority over, let's say, the lights at the field, right?
Memorial playground too. We'll put
That's one of the items. Yeah, that's going to be in the capital. But we have something that came up, I say a few weeks ago. It's about a $325,000 fix that has to get done sooner than later here at the high school.
Sorry, what's 325?
We have to update the panel, the fire panel here at the high school.
Okay.
It's working.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not
Yeah.
working,
Mhm.
but technology has changed, and when they put in that fire panel, I believe in 2000, the school was renovated. It was already outdated when they put it in,
Okay.
and that's through the bidding process. So you have a 20-something-year-old fire panel that was already outdated when it was put into the system. That
Is
now,
this essentially the same thing that we did?
correct.
We spent $330,000 for it.
Correct.
Right.
So it's the same exact thing
Okay.
now that
Same.
an outdated panel 20 years ago is functioning, it's working,
Yeah.
but it needs to be updated.
Right. Okay. So when you're looking at the 5-year, plan, and we're looking at what we have to do for Dale, I know there's a lot that needs to be done there. Are modulars at Dale or additional space at Dale on the radar as anything we're considering?
Yes, but
What we're gonna
Well,
do
I'm
is
asking
put a
you guys.
canopy over something,
What
a
we're-
solar canopy,
yeah.
and we're just gonna wall it off.
what we're going to address at Dale Street is to continue with the projects that we started last year, which is replacing the ceiling tiles in the
Right.
classroom, replacing the classroom flooring, the hallway flooring. What am I forgetting?
The locks last year.
We did all the locks last year, addressing the lighting issues. So those are the items that we started last year that we would need to continue on, because we said in our 5-year plan that we would do a portion of it every year for the
Right.
next 5 years, because we don't know where we are with the new building.
Right.
So, and those are items that have to be addressed.
Right. So modular at Memorial to take care of the potential preschool challenges,
Yeah. So
but no modular right now at Dale.
correct.
Correct. Okay.
Correct.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, it's that the work we know that needs to be done at Dale
Yeah.
needs to be done. But like I look at this list, it doesn't help with the list.
No. Yeah, it's true.
It's kind of, I was almost going to preserve this, but one of the things they said at the conference before, giving each student what they need, giving each school what they need. I mean, I look at that list and I say, hey, that Memorial and Dale jump off the page of this. It doesn't make sense to me that, well, Dale may not get it because all the other things have been done.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying that's
No,
your
no, no.
decision. It's just something
So what Dr. Mars and I will do is we'll put that 5-year together. We'll bring it to you, and you can say, I want this here and I want that there. And what we are going to do and say, this is the need, right? We know what there's $1 million right in there for schools and towns, but we will bring forward the needs, and then things can be moved around, but according to what the needs are today,
Yeah.
and how we project it out for 5 years, we'll do our best estimate.
Just looking at your note, October 12th. It seems like the real need for space is Memorial and Dale. At least Wheelock, from what and if I'm listening to the conversation correctly, would be at least one. I don't have a solution either. This I'm glad Leo added this. So whoever jumps off the page at this.
So, okay.
Thanks, Michael.
You're welcome. Michael's gonna bring running shoes next time.
Yeah, maybe you should just sit there.
Alright, super. Alright, next item on the agenda is policy, specifically public input.
Yeah, so I was going to speak to that. So in the packet, I just included, which I think we all can find, but our existing policy around public participation in school committee meetings. I did reference before I was in a MASC conference. Some of you may have gone to one-on-ones last week where they talked about the modernized flavor of that, and I just think it would be worth exploring that and trying to bring ours up to date. I think I've ever done a couple areas. I think it just provides a little more clarity on what type of topics could and should be. What's out there, what's relevant, what the process is. So my suggestion is, if it's in the packet, what we have, what's in MASC, what they would recommend, and why don't we make an attempt to update ours. If you want, I'm glad to make suggestions. I know we've also been talking about an ongoing digitizing all of our policies. If we are going to go through that, I think a natural place to start would be the public participation. Let's put the right amount of time on that.
Yeah.
Just as a baseline, there's a few things I think even the way we are running this meeting, it could be a little more streamlined. So today, all I wanted to do was bring that up as a topic that I think would be worth trying to get done. And I'm just saying, we would here's what we have, here's what they're suggesting. You probably write up what we would want, and maybe bring that forward as first reading. We're either first reading or just for discussion. I don't
This
really.
is not the first reading.
No,
No,
I don't
this is not
consider
the
this
first
in any
reading.
way, shape,
No.
or form.
Yeah,
But we would want to have a suggested policy. And it would be somewhere
first
between what
reading,
we have and
review,
what's in there.
approve. They said it shouldn't take more than 3 times.
Yes.
I do have, as I was reading through this and through some of my thoughts, I thought it was really important to go back to the original decision through the Middlesex Superior Court against, or the settlement against NAIG School, because the school committee in 2019, because that is essentially the kind of case that sets case law right now around public participation. And our public comment policy is kind of out of the norm on most school committees in the state of Massachusetts in some pretty specific ways.
That's very true, because I attended the public comment session at MASC, and what I said to people, they were like, wait, what?
What? Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So most require previous sign up beforehand for one specific period of time during the meeting, usually before, limited to 3 minutes per person, which is what the court felt was a reasonable amount of time to allot to anybody to kind of organize their thoughts. And that the most limit that time to no more than 20 minutes. Unless the chair chooses to extend it. There are some places that will do one at the beginning and one at the end. Nobody does it between each individual agenda item. And one of the things
Talking about items not on the agenda and on the agenda.
all in one thing. Yes.
Most the other school committee members I talked to don't have the option for people to address the committee on things not on the agenda. Correct, because they would email the chair beforehand or talk to the chair about adding agenda items, but they wouldn't be coming up to public comment and just talking about whatever they wanted to talk about.
Which is actually where
So most of them
got in
only
trouble.
use the agenda items as points of discussion.
Okay. Interesting.
Because it wasn't so much what was being discussed is that the discussion was shut down before there was any possibility of understanding whether that could be a item that could potentially come up under the school committee. And then I think that a lot of people have some misunderstandings around what is mandated by law as public participation and what is strongly encouraged and what I think we would strongly encourage, which is what different districts call public speak or public input. Public participation is the ability to watch your public body involved in making the policies and rules in an open, kind of an open forum. I do think that we can change. I would feel comfortable changing the policy, certainly, but I do also think that we need to expand in terms of procedures, what we do for public speak itself, in terms of how we put that together. You know, frequently we will get a barrage of letters, emails from people about a specific issue within that week that we know is going to show up on an agenda at some point. And we also have people now coming in through video and Zoom, and we also have people coming in to present. I think that all of those should be encapsulated and put within our meeting minutes, duly, duly identified. But I do think, again, with the transparency initiatives, I don't know really what the rest of the boards or the committees in town do, but people do seem to hold us to a higher standard. And so I think it's also important that we also show people truly transparently what their peers think, all of them, not just the ones who are brave enough to show up here and talk here, or the people who are brave enough to come over on video. But if there is a significant amount of email or whatever, I think it's important that we also show that on this particular issue. And I also think that it helps you, especially if we were to sign up beforehand, as chair and between you and Dr. Marsden, it helps you kind of identify, oh, there are 6 people here who are saying that this part of the agenda is so important to me, to really understand in the community whether that's something we need to be talking about a longer and in a more in-depth way than kind of flash in the pan issues that happen and then everybody kind of goes away, right? So how do we construct our conversations in the most efficient way possible? How do we make sure that issues that are coming to us are actually appropriate for the running of government, which is the other thing that the court said was very important. And how do we make sure that we're actually allowing people to communicate directly with people who may do them the most good and also form the biggest connection, right? If you come and present to us about something that might involve Mr. Grenham, how is that helping the community? Aside from us being a sounding board, how is that helping the community then connect with Mr. Grenham in a way that they can understand what's happening there and have that kind of richer communication between student and parent and staff? So I think that I would just like to see our public speak better structured. I'd like to see that the people who are commenting, all of their peers can see that is the kind of range of opinions. And then I think, and that's a procedural thing, it's not necessarily a policy issue. And then how do we disseminate that in a way that people understand what it is we need to do legally, what it is that our roles are, and that we don't have to sit here like Mount Rushmore and, simply give the appearance that we don't care when, and indeed we do, but we simply so often can't interact without being at true risk of violating open meeting law.
We have to do a better job of educating in terms of, because I think culturally, people see, for example, the select board meetings. There's dialogue. There's,
right.
So that's a different
That's a different thing, but that's also, you know, they need to,
Well, no,
that needs to be their thing because if we were doing that.
there is an expectation
Mhm.
that should be our thing as
Right,
well.
but we are held to higher standards in terms
Yes.
of our open meeting law complaints and things, so.
We do have Jim Hardy from MASC.
Oh,
Mhm.
I think I did one. I think that was my first
Massachusetts
one. Yep.
Association of School Committees, who is going to come to our December 8th.
Oh,
You
good.
suggested it
Yes,
last year.
and then we put that off.
Yes, but
After,
I thought
yeah.
that was a great idea, so I
Right.
followed up with him,
Mhm.
because I do think it's an education piece,
Right.
that's on us to educate folks as well in terms of specifically what is our role, how do we best communicate, how do we best listen, because there is an expectation, and
Yeah,
we do owe
absolutely.
it to the community to listen.
Right.
And,
But I want to make sure that we're not frustrating people by listening to things that we
100%.
don't and should not be touching
Yes.
and
Right.
thinking about how do we make those
I think
connections at
it's
the lower
just
level.
Suggesting that I think the MASC model is worth looking into.
Oh, yeah.
I think the most thing it's items not on the, having public comment for each item on the agenda to me just seems a little bit
Is the
more
least
onerous
efficient way of
than we need. That's a
government.
major takeaway. And then there's a second piece, and I was trying to understand it because it's the -E, but it's the guidelines for public comment. So if
Mhm.
somebody at least wanted to say, hey, I don't understand why
Right.
they don't say anything, at least it outlines what happens. So I don't want to reinvent a wheel.
No,
that,
I don't either.
you know,
In
they
fact,
did
it was
when
my
they-
first open meeting law complaint when somebody didn't file. I tried to do an educational piece around guidelines for public comment, and it didn't end up in the minutes. But I think I do think it's important that we set the guidelines as well, which is not really policy, which is why it's kind of
So we don't have that currently.
Correct. We
No.
don't, right. It's I goes up there. It's the -E, which I forget they eventually described it. It's
Yeah.
kind of an case. It's kind of like, there are different places. That's the policy. Then how are you going to implement it? But take a look.
Mhm.
I think their model looked good. I wouldn't, there wasn't a lot in there that I was like, hey, we couldn't do this because X. I think that
No,
would be
not
a
at all.
natural, thing to talk
There's
about.
also a case right now in front of the SGC that will specifically, most likely, give guidelines around how public comment is going to work going forward. The lawyers that spoke estimated that we would get ruling in early 2023. Technically, it's against a board of selectmen, but she said it will likely go to all public comment. So
right.
I think that's another good reason to start with this. We know we're going to have to look at it again anyway. We know we'll likely have to update it in early 2023. Let's just start looking at it now, and then when that ruling comes, we'll already
You can
know
look
where
at
we
the
need to tweak.
procedures
Yeah.
that we have on
Yeah.
top of that. Can I send these? I have two resources that I think are important to include with the meeting packets. One is from the Boston Bar Association about the original ruling, and then the other one is from Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane, who actually who are our attorneys, but also argued this case. So that they're both kind of interesting encapsulations. One is more about the legal nuances, and one is more about specifically what school committees should or should not be able to do. And I'd be happy to send that around to you. Andrea has it already, and she can include it in the packets.
Super, thank you. I just would like to reiterate that we're not trying to stifle.
Oh no, golly, no.
And
I think we just want more, but in a more efficient way.
Yes, and I think with Michelle's proposal, which we'll talk about later, the informal forums.
Yes.
Yeah.
That'll give other opportunities to engage with school committee members and to bring topics to our attention. Tim having, site council people, part of our process now, that has been effective, I think. So, anyways, are there any comments? Because we're still under old policy, because I think this is important if people want to comment on this process. Bruce, did you have anything to say? Share?
Not at this time.
Okay, all right, sure.
I don't see any hands raised.
I will send this up to all of you now.
All right, so next meeting, we'll have
A robust first reading.
yes, and if folks have any comments, they should please email us, the SE chair, at Medfield.net. Great. All right, thank you.
Actually, at the first reading, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, at the first reading for this, could we also potentially put together a summary of this discussion and the reasons? Because I think that there's this feeling that we're trying to shut things down. I mean, indeed, we're actually trying to clarify and open up.
Yes.
You know, so I think that if people are looking at the agenda and saying, well, what do you mean that this is it? I'd really like to have some educational material behind that, just even then. So I don't know how we will quite do that, but if we could develop that.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Super. All right. Medfield High School student activity adjustment request. Michael.
So under your financial policies, you're required to do any transfers for student activity accounts. The high school is requesting a student activity transfer from the class of 2019 for $6,710.25, and they would like to put that into the student enrichment line item for $6,710.25. They did reach out to the class president, the 2019, to request the remaining account balance be transferred and to be used for the discretion of the principal under the student activity account. So I would need a vote in order for that transfer to go through.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other items since posting Dr. Webster? Okay. So, old business. New elementary school project.
Oh, the chess club. Yes. No, nobody panic. We gotcha. Andrea's gotcha. She keeps us in line.
Oh, yeah, the
No, it's-
club, the chess club. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so in order to establish a new student activity account under the school committee policies, the school committee has to approve the new account to be established, and that would be the the Medfield High School Chess Club, and that would be under Kerry Lynch, the science teacher at the high school.
And we have to vote on it.
So yes, we would have to vote on it.
The folks read the letter from the
Yes.
student.
Seems incredibly reasonable. I can't believe we don't have a chess club. How does that happen? I thought that was like high school 101.
Exactly. So, do we have a motion to approve this new club?
Any chess players amongst you?
So moved, Tim.
And second,
Second, Michelle.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing it to our attention that we didn't have this basic club.
Alrighty, so, old business, new elementary school project. Hallelujah, 16 people applied. As applicants by that November 1st deadline. And so, I actually had a chat with Tim, the vice chair, and we've come up with a plan for selection. And the idea is, or the proposal is, to have a workshop coming up. We'll determine that date. And in that workshop, actually just today I shared, or Brittany from central office shared viewing access for all of you, so you can see all the applications, the resumes, the letters of interest.
Are those also publicly listed on the SBC website as well?
I'm not sure if that, all the names have been publicly shared yet. I know it's been
It strikes me
shared
that
with us
should be
and-
one of those things that people
select board.
Would want to know, but okay.
Yeah, so far. So our proposal is that we have a workshop,
Just us.
just us,
Got it.
coming up soon.
Okay.
And that would be in two parts. So one being each school committee member would develop questions that they would like to ask prospective applicants. And the second part would be that each school committee member would come up with a short list of 3 or 4 candidates that each of you would ideally like to interview as a group. And also explain why you chose that short list. And the hope is that, we'll come to a consensus of a short list of folks to interview. Does that make sense?
It does. And when we're evaluating these, we're still looking at our 2 selections. Ideally, need to have education experience.
Ideally,
some-
but not
But it's not mandatory.
mandatory.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
a little squishy.
And then we
but,
would determine, based on, our applicant shortlist pool, we would then determine an interview date and invite people to interview using the same set of questions. And this would have to be an open meeting, but
They all are.
have Zoom.
I think I think we should have Zoom. I don't feel like at this point we can cherry pick which workshops, which interviews
I suppose workshops we do not.
but we should. I really did feel like last time when we did a workshop and we didn't record it, we were leaving ourselves and the issues that we were talking about open to interpretation
Okay.
in a way that is difficult for anybody else to tell really what did or did not happen. And I think that it's, in this day and age, if you don't record it, you don't, it's almost like it didn't happen. And so how do we cherry pick one thing or the other? Unless, we can't and don't record executive sessions for obvious reasons, but everything else, it seems to me that we have this, particularly in something in which there has been so much concern about transparency, and particularly in an environment in which the town moderator is not going to be choosing his applicants through an interview kind of public forum because he's not beholden to that. I do think it's enormously important for us to hold ourselves to the higher standards the community holds us to. Otherwise, I think that it feels hinky to me if we don't record virtually everything, because I do think that it's important that as many people have information they can access, and be able to kind of, have the right, if not the initiative, to check their facts. I really feel like to not record ourselves at this point leaves the municipality kind of hanging out there for additional costs around open meeting law violations, around misinterpretations, around, it's unfortunate, but I think that if we're going to reestablish public trust and take that upon ourselves, then we do it in the open.
Okay. I had spoken to the Long Meadow folks, just to get and find out what their process was, because I really online.
I do remember that. Yep.
Everything, and I spoke to the chair, and she had suggested that, or she'd shared their process.
When did they do this?
They did this in August.
Okay.
So very fresh.
And Did they have a failed building project before that? I know. So that's why I'm saying I know that I like very much what Long Meadow has done, and I kind of looked at it, but the fact of the matter is that we are dealing with a failed building project because the community has, rightfully or wrongfully, accused the body of the SBC and us by kind of by substitution of being not as open. So if they want openness, we can only hold ourselves accountable. We can't hold anyone else accountable as a body, but we can hold ourselves accountable.
Do we know the select board's proposed process?
I'm a little concerned that it isn't the same, but
No, but I've spoken to Gus, and so November 15th, they're gonna have it on their agenda.
Okay.
And they are gonna discuss all the candidates openly. He is hoping, from what I understand, what I heard, he is hoping that hopefully they will all come to the same conclusions.
Okay. So they're not interviewing then.
Well, if they do not have the consensus of the folks they are to choose, then it would go to another meeting, and they may or may not do an interview process.
Okay.
But I thought,
and by virtue of the fact that that is a select board meeting, then it will also be recorded, right? So it would be a little funky optics for us not to. I mean, I just feel like I have to.
I think
We have a board of 5,
I'm not sure.
so all of you have a different vote. But my strong thought is that if we're going to try to establish whatever trust people have in us or have chosen not to have, we can't play into that. We can
I suppose
cart our own
my
path.
hesitation, Jess, is that sensitivity of just having an interview on Zoom.
No, I hear you, but is the select board going to do anything different? They're going to have a whole. They're going to discuss people.
I'm not sure we're talking about this because there's a workshop, and in the workshop that you were describing, that we would at least say these are the questions we think are worth talking about.
Should also.
And
be
the second part, and the second part of the workshop would be these are the candidates that we think, either quote short list, and you said is there reasons why.
Yeah.
That
was a meeting, whether that's recorded or not. I mean, some workshops we don't. Sometimes it's like sometimes it's I think similar to like an interview. Sometimes it's just an easier conversation there.
I hear you.
Somebody could be coming in and he or she or they may be participating in an interview, and the Zoom may change the way they come across right off the bat. Like I was just thinking about.
They have to be recorded probably the whole time going forward. So I feel like if they can't cut it on that one factor,
I was gonna say,
then
you're gonna be on
you're
Zoom
eliminating
like you would
yourself
not believe.
anyway, right? It's in my opinion, right? I also feel like when we're talking about some of the accusations that came up against the previous SBC and SC, I think one of the things that this would help that with is, you're allowing then people to watch and make their own judgment calls on things, right? And like that's where I guess I also
this is truly public participation.
If we also want to be setting this new SBC up for success, I don't want someone in the future to be accusing us or the person that we select of any sort of anything, right? Like, so I feel like right there you have that all out there. Like, they didn't get a different question, or if they did, this was the conversation that happened around it, and that's not what happened. It was behind closed doors and there's no recording, and they did something in bad faith again to get the kids to school. So horrible. So I think that it needs to be recorded as well.
I just think it's part of the culture now. I mean, if we have meetings or workshops sometimes at 10 a.m. and all of a sudden that's become shifty, even if we record it. So I know it's almost like you can't win, and I don't want to kill us by bending over backwards, but the fact of the matter is that Zoom is Zoom.
I hear you.
And I think Michelle has a good
Someone's
point.
going to record us anyways.
That's true too.
And be interpreted.
Yep.
So let's be our own saran wrap.
So, we'll come up with a date. I'm hoping we'll do that sooner rather than later, as in i.e. next week. Hopefully.
A lot of people.
And,
Do we want to try to do that now, Anime?
We should get Leo's availability too. He's not
yes,
here right
no,
now.
I'll
Yeah.
reach out to each of you to find out a common date.
If somebody were, in order to make it time, if somebody were to need to phone in with that, or could we have a split meeting? If we needed to do a workshop and say Leo could only be here remotely, and we held an in-person, would that be acceptable to you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Have that be clarified.
Yeah. All right, so that process makes sense?
Yeah.
All
Sounds
right,
great.
So you come into that workshop with your questions, and we'll come to a consensus and choose our 4 or whatever. And then you'll come with your short list and your reasons why.
All right.
And then we'll extend invitations out for each of you.
Sounds great.
Very good. All right, cool. Thank you. Community engagement and communications. Michelle, did you want to talk about the informal forums, please?
Sure. So included in the meeting packet was kind of the outline on how the informal forum works. The concept around it is a more structured approach to the idea behind office hours. So, I mean, I can read it, but it's pretty straightforward, I feel like. Does anyone have any, we talked about this a little bit last time too. Does anyone have any questions on how this would work? No? Okay. So then, do we take public comment on this?
Yeah.
Does anyone in the audience have questions on this? No. Okay. So then we're looking at doing it. So Jess and I talked briefly about early December, right?
Like
Weekend.
December 3rd.
Yep. So Saturday morning, 1 hour, potential use of the library. I can probably drop by there tomorrow and see what that looks like. And then date number 2 would be a virtual weeknight evening. We would want 2 separate school committee members volunteering for that. January 18th, tentative. That's the week before our public hearing on the budget. So that would allow people to kind of come in that space. So that's where we are in the informal forum. Social media initiative started strong. We launched on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter a little over 3 weeks ago. Our top 3 performing posts were the 2 Friday posts. People really, really interacted well with the photos and kind of what's going around the district. And the other top post was our first SBC post. We did 2 SBC posts. The first one did really well. The second one didn't do as well. During the MASC conference, I attended a session on communication, kind of telling your district's narrative. And one of the suggestions that the presenter had was really being able to gather stories directly from teachers and administrators and kind of being able to showcase those. And I feel that the success that the 2 Friday posts have had really kind of show that that's what will engage our community, is that ability to be able to really tell those stories coming directly from the schools. So I don't have a plan right now on how to execute that. He gave some ideas, but I would love to kind of sit down and really be able to do that so we can start highlighting some of the things around. In my own brain, I know Marisa Gomez outside of school, but I know she does pie day every year for the 7th graders, right? Like she bakes pie, she brings it in. It's this thing that happens. And I love that. And I want to be able to find those kind of things that you wouldn't know if you didn't know. Do you know what I mean? And being able to share those kind of stories with that.
Is there a way that we can latch that back to, like we try to with everything, to the strategic plan? I know that that's not very sexy on social media, but there's like a blurb.
Yep.
Like this is, enhanced student learning, or, this, or so we're kind of looking at that as a way of connecting it back to the school committee.
Yeah,
it's not just
Here's a
that
fun story
these are
about
fun
pie.
things that kids do. This is also what your money, your town, your school committee helps support over time.
Yeah, it could be both, right? Like some of them can just be feel-good interest stories, and other ones could be specifically targeted back towards that. Those could be separate campaigns that are happening within the communication. And then also just from a communication standpoint, and tying back a little bit we were talking about earlier, education of the public, right? Like
Budget season. Sorry.
I was thinking more like we're in quorum right now, and that's why we can't really talk to people. But two of us is not a quorum, and that's why we can talk to people. I feel like there are these, I don't want to call them vocab words, but kind of more like definitions that I think everyone understands on this high level, but there's these nuances and rules behind it that I think if we can figure out like kind of bite-sized pieces of information to share that people can understand now, like why, what does open meeting law really mean? How does that just kind of how everything ties together? So again, that's a series that I would like to figure out how to do, but I feel like I need to nail down.
Were you in the video?
No, you were in
One with
video.
me?
I was in
Okay.
video. Yeah.
So the way you're talking about this, and I think I spoke to Dr. Marston about this in Sudbury. There's there's a parent who is also a media producer, and he has started working with the Sudbury schools to chunk out some of these in very short videos. These kind of topics. They started during COVID about 8 ways to teach your kid or whatever. But now they're looking at things like, okay, this is what social studies is now.
Yeah.
And, kind of chunking out these little bite-sized pieces of information that are really important, and could be found anywhere in any number of resources. So it's not original information, but it's short information found and easily accessed.
Yeah.
Within a 2 or 3 minute kind of thing. I don't think we should be doing videos or anything like that. He does have a business plan that I think is going to take a while. I know you can't, but we have to do things that are sustainable and can be handed on to the next generation. That's
Next generation can do it.
In terms of tasking, how we task ourselves, we have so many good ideas and so few minions. But there are, ways of kind of chunking out these really important things, like what is public, what is the open meeting law, and why do we spend so much time talking about it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good law. I mean, it's I think it's great.
Great idea.
It's a great idea. It has tough, constantly morphing interpretation.
Yeah.
So,
And then I think PTO was the last part, but that was
yeah, actually, two or maybe 3 comments. One, I just wanted, so for the school committee
informal forums.
informal things, you're suggesting 2 of them before the end of January?
One of them now and one of them in the new year. Yes.
The only thing I'm like, if we're been part of that driver for that is because of the budget, don't we do a budget presentation for the town?
Do a public hearing.
Yes.
But
So
the idea of the informal forum is you can talk to a school committee member, right? In the public hearing, can they?
I do. I
dialogue
understand it.
there?
I just want to be a little mindful of
Yeah.
rushed versus right.
Yeah.
Right. And the informal could be to talk about any topics.
Right.
Right. And if you are
It still would
I
be,
wouldn't
yes.
necessarily say, hey, let's make sure we do it in January because of the budget. We do have a public.
I suppose because I was the one who suggested that to Michelle because one of the what do we call them for office hours? That just before budget or during that budget cycle, that's when we got the most attendees to come to an office hour. Is when we were talking money. So I had suggested to Michelle, could you do one before or name a date?
So then you and the unintended consequence might be, hey, some of those people don't come to the public session where we have the budget formally presented.
And nobody went last year anyway.
Well, I just think, to me, it doesn't, I don't care too much, but if you're saying, hey, let's get it in place, let's December 15th and January 15th, and then we're going to evaluate, okay, so are we doing it every month now? Are we doing it how frequently are we going to do these? And I do think about sustainability.
Yeah, Anime and I talked about testing the first 2 and seeing kind of what the vibe was, and then going from there.
The whole year
Yeah.
and see if we even get any takers.
It's true.
And then the other comment, there is somebody who raised their hand.
Oh, great.
When we started at least, and I'm not sure, but it's Chris McHugh Potts.
Okay.
And I don't know whether it was this topic or the prior.
Hop her over.
So I don't know if you can.
Owen, sorry, do you mind popping over Chris and make sure her video's on, please, Chris? While we're waiting for that, is she on?
I think we're still waiting, but and even then, some of like what you're describing is like the videos or other things. Maybe that's what the administration does. You know, maybe they can contribute to that if it's what you're posting on Fridays or whatever. Maybe you have.
Oh no, everything I've been grabbing is stuff that's already being published around the district.
correct,
It's just in a more
Yeah,
concentrated place.
that
Yeah.
would be the most logical way.
Yeah.
So the administration just, hey, what do you want to bring forward?
Right.
That gives you the sustainability.
Yeah, I think they were talking about it, like really just literally an email address or cache that you could
Yeah.
look through and be able to
A Google
pick
form
things.
where they can dump their ideas.
Right, you can just pick things and be like, oh, this totally fits for this right now.
Yeah.
This is great for this right now, and kind of be able to connect with people in that way.
Hi there. Hi. Do you have camera on, Chris?
It won't let me put the camera on.
Okay, all right, shoot.
It says the host has stopped it.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. So, I had my hand up about the public input, public participation policy, and I think you guys saw it, but that wasn't beamed in.
I didn't see
I don't think any of us saw it, Chris. Sorry.
I apologize for not seeing it.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So I just wanted to bring up a couple points, actually 3 points. So a lot of these, I'm sorry, I'm starting my video now. You may have known that I went to the summit, the DESE summit, a couple Fridays ago, which was amazing. It was on community partnerships and really pulling everyone together because of the learning loss and how incredibly important it is to have a level of community engagement and public participation and partnerships between parents, community members, and the districts and educators. We're looking forward now, and so many of these public participation policies are looking backward. They are old, they are outdated. So when we're talking about wanting to instill community engagement, we need to be progressive and we need to look forward and not back. If you do research on all the different school boards across the country, so many of them allow public participation during key agenda items during their meetings. And I also want to note that Brown University has done some recent research on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I will read to you their sort of quick synopsis. With more two-way dialogue, school board meetings could draw more diverse audiences, study finds. A study shows that giving the public more opportunities to converse with school board leaders at meetings could increase civic engagement and lead to more public trust in officials, especially among low-income groups and people of color. So as you're looking at revising this policy, these are all really important points to take into consideration, because I look at what you're talking about in terms of curtailing our public participation policy as going backwards and not being progressive and moving forward to meet the needs of the community. And I think it's really important to take that into consideration.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
In terms of communication.
So Owen, we're done with that comment.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chris.
PTO is the other part, I think.
PTO piece. So each school committee member got back to me in terms of if they had a request of which PTO to more purposely engage with. And Michelle has requested the high school, Leo Blake, I will do Dale, Tim will do Wheelock, and Jess.
Leaves me with Memorial. Yay! Great.
All right. So again, the intention, as Tim had spoken about, is connect with the president of the PTO that you are going to be engaging with, and attempt to go at least a couple of times.
Right.
And make connections. I'm excited to go back to Dale personally. So good. All right. Anything else to note on that? Because I cannot believe how late it is. Donations.
I have one donation, Madam Chair. I ask that you approve the Wheelock PTO has donated $1,500 $39 to the Ralph Wheelock School for the Plymouth Tuxedo Museum trip. I have the company has to approve as presented.
Motion,
So moved.
do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Super, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Alrighty, any informational items? Okay.
I just want to say thank you for the district for sending us to MASC, and thank you to the chair and the fellow committee members for allowing us to move the meeting from last Thursday to this Monday so that we could attend the sessions on Friday. Overall, I really loved the conference. I found it really informative. Parts of it were really inspirational, and I feel like I learned a ton. Sometimes you go to a conference and there's like a dud session or a panel, and I didn't find that with anything. Every one of them was just so well done. And I left everyone with like a lot of quality information that I feel like my mind is still buzzing with some of the things that I learned while we were there. The big topics I felt that I ended up attending sessions on had to do with DEI, mental health, policy, public comment, and communication strategies. But anyway, I just want to say thank you, and that I really enjoyed it. So
We do actually have a policy in which we are supposed to engage that information and spread that information amongst each other. So, if you have handouts, flyers, whatever, I suggest that we, kind of trade it amongst each other and maybe in our informational items for next meeting.
Yes.
Would that
because-
work?
Yeah, no, I was kind of hoping that we would, share those golden nuggets, but as it's quite late,
Yes.
I think maybe we can table that to maybe the next one.
As it deserves more
Yes,
time.
I would agree with that.
Just
Yeah.
yeah.
it was cool.
Okay.
No, it's, I think that's a good idea. The conference was excellent, but I agree, it's after 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the enthusiasm around some of those nuggets.
Yes, we don't want to lose that. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So Michelle, second. Jess.
Riley.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned, see you on the 17th.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Have a good evening.
Thank you.